morning after the plague feels like the world is holding its breath. You wake to the sound of birds that you haven't heard in months, or perhaps years. Their chirping seems strange now, like a sound from another age. The air outside your small wooden home is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and ashes. Dew clings to the grass, shining in the pale light of dawn, and for a moment, the quiet is so deep that it almost frightens you. You step outside slowly. Your hands tremble a little as you touch the wooden frame of the door, the same door that has seen so many come and go. The village feels empty, like a dream half-remembered. The houses still stand, but many are shuttered and silent. A cat darts across the path, thin and wild-eyed. Somewhere in the distance you hear the creak of a cart, but when you look, there is nothing there. The Black Death has passed. It has left its mark on everything, on faces, on streets, on hearts. You can still smell the faint trace of herbs and smoke in the air, the remnants of desperate attempts to purify what couldn't be understood. You walk toward the well in the village square. The bucket hangs askew, the rope frayed. The water below reflects a pale blue sky, and you stare at your own reflection, thinner, older, and more hollow-eyed than before. You realize quietly that you've survived something that most did not, but survival feels strange. It's not joy. It's something softer, heavier, a kind of sorrow shaped like gratitude. A few figures begin to appear along the road, people you recognize but who now move like ghosts. They nod faintly, not quite ready to speak. Words feel too sharp in this fragile silence. For now, it is enough just to see another living face. As the sun climbs higher, its light spills over the thatched roofs and broken fences. The warmth feels almost foreign on your skin, as though the sun itself had been absent for too long. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. You can hear bees again faintly. You can smell bread baking from one of the surviving homes. And in that moment, you realize that life, quietly and stubbornly, is beginning again. There is work to do. Too much, perhaps. The fields must be tended, though half the hands that once worked them are gone. The church bell has not rung in months, its rope cut when the last priest fell ill. You wonder if someone will mend it. Perhaps you will. Perhaps someone must. You walk toward the fields, where weeds have grown wild and tall. The soil beneath your boots is rich and dark. It remembers everything that has fallen into it. You think of the harvests that failed, the markets that vanished, the songs that went unsung. And yet, as your fingers brush against the tender shoots pushing through the earth, you understand something wordless. The land does not stop. It grieves, perhaps, but it does not end. As evening settles, a thin fog rises from the fields. The air grows cool again, and you light a small fire near your door. The flames crackle softly, and the smell of smoke drifts upward into the endless dark. Somewhere beyond the hills, a bell finally rings. Just once, faint and hollow, like a heartbeat restarting. You sit quietly beside the fire, hands folded, listening. For the first time in a long while, you feel that you are not alone in your survival. There are others out there, tired, frightened, and breathing just as you are. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll speak. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll rebuild. But tonight, you simply listen to the silence. The silence that no longer means death, but the fragile beginning of life again. And as you close your eyes, the world feels still, gentle, and waiting. The plague has ended, but history has only just begun again. Morning comes slowly, spilling gold across the broken world. You rise with the faint gray light, your breath clouding in the cool air. The night's mist still lingers over the ground, drifting like memory, thin, uncertain, almost shy to leave. When you open your door, the chill meets you first, followed by the quiet hum of awakening life, the call of a raven, the rustle of a breeze through unkempt grass, the far-off trickle of a stream that hasn't forgotten its course. You walk the path toward the fields. Once it was lined with footprints, laughter, and the distant rhythm of scythes slicing through summer wheat. Now weeds have claimed it. The soil is scattered with wildflowers and patches of green that no one planted. You feel their petals brush your fingers as you pass, soft, innocent, unaware of what was lost here. The fields themselves stretch wide and lonely. The fences are broken, the plow left rusting where it fell. A faint smell of old hay and turned earth fills the air, mingled with something deeper. A scent of life returning, shy but unstoppable. You kneel down and dig your hands into the soil. It's cold and damp, clinging to your skin. For a long moment, you stay that way, breathing in the scent of it. You think of all the hands that once touched this ground, all the sweat that soaked into it. You remember your neighbor Thomas, who used to hum when he worked the far ridge. You remember the sound of carts creaking under the weight of grain, and children running between the rows. All gone now. The memories fall over you like dust, but in the stillness you hear something else. The faint chirp of a lark. You lift your head, and there it is, small and defiant, perched on a fence post, singing to no one in particular. Its song feels impossibly bright, piercing through the quiet. You smile weakly at first, and then fully. Somehow, that tiny sound carries more hope than any sermon or speech could. You decide to work. There is no one to tell you where to begin, no lord to command you, no steward to measure your yield. Just you, the land, and the promise of something new. You pull at the weeds, feeling the ache in your arms, but it is a good ache. Alive, real, grounding. The earth accepts you as if it had been waiting. All across the countryside, others are doing the same. You hear faint echoes of axes in distant woods, the creak of carts being repaired, the bleating of a few surviving sheep. The rhythm of life is beginning again, awkwardly but earnestly. Villages that once seemed doomed start to breathe again, slowly, carefully, like lungs relearning how to expand. The world after the plague is not the same as before. Too many have gone, and their absence has changed everything. Where once a lord's word ruled the land, now the balance feels uncertain. There are more empty hands than commands. The survivors look around and realize they are free in a way they never were. You feel it too. For the first time, the thought of working your own piece of land does not seem impossible. The great manors lie half abandoned, the fields unclaimed. The pestilence has left behind not just grief but opportunity, strange, fragile, and new. You can sense it in the air, like the scent before a summer storm. By midday the sun is high, and you rest under the shade of an old oak. You sip from a small flask of water, its taste metallic but cool. Around you, the world hums softly. Bees, wind, the crackle of insects in the grass. You feel the weight of exhaustion in your bones. Yet beneath it, something else, a flicker of peace. You think of the generations before, bound to the soil by law and by birth, tied to lords and rents and endless dues. Now the lines of power are breaking, quietly and invisibly. The world does not yet know it, but this emptiness, these vacant fields, will become the cradle of change. When the day fades, you gather what little wood you can find and return home. Smoke from your small fire curls upward into the twilight sky, joining others from distant hearths. The village glows faintly, fewer homes than before, but still enough to form a constellation of human warmth. You hear laughter, soft, uncertain laughter, from somewhere near the well. Someone is telling a story. Someone else is cooking soup. You close your eyes and let the sounds wash over you. They are small sounds, but they are everything. The air grows cooler as the moon rises. You sit outside for a while, watching mist curl across the fields like silver cloth. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the land beneath you, slow and steady. Tomorrow, you'll wake and do it again. Dig, mend, plant, rebuild. There is no plan, no promise, only the gentle rhythm of persistence. And as you drift toward sleep, you understand that from the emptiness of these fields, a new world is quietly being born. The fields are empty now, but in their silence lies the whisper of a revolution yet to come. The dawn comes soft and gray, sliding through the cracks of your shuttered window. You lie still for a while, listening to the hush of wind outside, the faint creak of the timbers, the sleepy call of a crow perched somewhere beyond your door. The world feels gentler now, not healed, not whole, but quieter, as if it too is learning how to breathe again. When you step outside, a mist lingers low over the ground, curling around your ankles like ghostly thread. The fields beyond your home shimmer faintly with dew. The smell of wet earth greets you, sharp, clean, alive. You draw your cloak tighter and begin to walk toward the village square. The sound of your boots on the dirt road feels lonely but comforting. The village looks different now. The silence that once meant death now hums with the sound of rebuilding. Somewhere, a hammer strikes wood, a slow, steady rhythm. Smoke rises from more chimneys than before. And for the first time in months, perhaps years, You see the faint hint of trade returning. A cart creaking in from the next village, a handful of people huddled near the old market cross. But there's something else too. A quiet tension, a new kind of uncertainty. The plague has ended, but it has left the world unbalanced. The old ways don't fit quite right anymore. Too many laborers are gone. Too many hands that once served, harvested, and built have vanished into the earth. You notice it first in whispers. Farmers speaking softly about wages, about asking for more. It seems a daring thing to even think of, let alone say aloud. But the truth is plain to see. With so few workers left, every surviving hand has become precious. Lords who once commanded, obedience now find their fields empty, their barns bare. And those who still live, you among them, know their worth. When you reach the square, you find a small group gathered around the old stone well. A man named Edwin, once a serf like you, speaks in a hushed, measured tone. His clothes are worn, but his eyes burn with quiet resolve. 4 pence a day, he says softly, for work that once earned 2. They need us now. The others murmur, uncertain but intrigued. You feel a strange flutter in your chest. Not quite rebellion, not quite hope, just something new, unnameable, rising within you like a tide. The manors, once grand and unshakable, now stand half empty. The lords, desperate to bring in their harvests, begin offering coin to those who will work. Coin, not obligation, not command, actual wages. It feels strange, almost forbidden. Yet it spreads quickly, like fire through dry grass. You find yourself working one such field before the week's end. The overseer speaks to you with a politeness you've never heard before, a kind of nervous courtesy. The pay is small, but it is yours. When you hold the cold silver in your palm that evening, your fingers tremble. It gleams in the firelight, and you realize that for the first time in your life, your labor belongs to you. But not everyone welcomes this change. Far away in London and the manors of the great lords, fear begins to grow. The powerful see what is happening, the way peasants speak with new confidence, the way fields are left untended unless terms are met. The world they knew, the world built on obedience and endless labor, is shifting beneath them. Rumors reach your village soon enough. The King's Council, they say, is planning new laws, to freeze wages, to forbid workers from leaving their lords' lands. They call it the Ordinance of Laborers. The words feel heavy, foreign, but their meaning is clear. The old world is trying to pull itself back together, even as the new one struggles to be born. You hear these rumors one evening by the fire. The orange glow flickers across tired faces, and for a while, no one speaks. Then Edwin breaks the silence. They can write what laws they like, he says softly, but they cannot raise the dead to fill their fields. The words hang in the smoky air. You realize how true they are, and how dangerous. As weeks pass, tension deepens. Some lords offer fair pay and peace, rebuilding with those who remain. Others tighten their grip, clinging to the old ways, demanding obedience that can no longer be given. Across the land, whispers turn to defiance, and defiance begins to spark something larger, a quiet stirring that will, in time, shake the kingdom itself. But for now, you work, you plant, you earn, you share bread with those who survived. The world feels fragile but alive. You walk home at dusk, silver coins in your pocket, your steps slow and steady on the dirt road. The setting sun paints the horizon in amber and violet, and the smell of hay drifts through the cooling air. When you reach your door, you pause. The sound of laughter drifts from a nearby home, soft, hesitant laughter, as though the world is still uncertain if it's allowed to be joyful again. You smile faintly. Inside, your fire burns low, and the warmth of the room wraps around you like a blanket. You hold the coin once more, feeling its cool weight against your skin. Freedom, you realize, does not arrive all at once. It begins like this: a whisper, a wage, a slow shifting of the earth beneath your feet. Outside, the wind sighs across, the empty fields and the stars begin to bloom in the dark sky. You close your eyes, and the world hums softly, endlessly. The price of survival is change, and the fear of what that change will bring. The morning feels heavier now. You wake to the sound of distant hooves, not the steady rhythm of farm work, but the sharp metallic echo of patrols. The kind that make people close their doors and glance nervously through the shutters. The air itself seems to carry a warning. When you step outside, the sky is overcast, the light muted and gray. A chill wind runs through the fields, bending the grass in restless waves. You can smell rain coming, mixed with smoke from far-off hearths. The world feels uneasy, not with sickness this time, but with something quieter, deeper. In the weeks since the new laws were spoken of, the mood across the countryside has shifted. At first you hoped the rumors were only rumors, distant words that would never reach your small village. But now, the messengers have come. They ride in under the king's banner, their cloaks heavy with dust, their expressions stern. They nail parchment to the post by the church door, and when you go to read it, the ink still glistens. The words are formal, harsh, and absolute. Let no man demand more in wages than he did before the pestilence, under pain of imprisonment. Let every laborer remain bound to his master's service, as he was accustomed. You read the lines twice, and then a third time. The words blur in your vision. Around you, the others stand in silence, their faces tight, their eyes unreadable. No one speaks. Only the wind moves, tugging gently at the parchment. For a moment, it feels as though time itself has turned backward, as if all the quiet progress of the last months was only a dream. You think of the coins you earned, the small pride of honest pay, the new sense of worth that had begun to grow among the survivors. And now, this. That night, the tavern is full but hushed. The fire crackles, casting red light across tired faces. You sit among them, your hands wrapped around a cup of ale that tastes bitter and thin. The air is thick with frustration, the kind that hums just beneath the surface, too dangerous to voice. At one end of the room, Edwin speaks again, his tone low but steady. They can pass all the laws they wish, he says, but the world they're writing for is gone. Half their servants lie in the ground. Who will plow their fields if we walk away? A few nod, others glance toward the door, fearful of being overheard. You listen, feeling the pulse of something larger than fear beginning to stir in your chest. It isn't anger, not exactly. It's awareness, the realization that those who survive have power, even if no one dares to say it aloud. Outside, the rain begins to fall, soft at first, then steadier. You can hear it drumming against the roof, trickling down the gutters. The scent of wet earth fills the air. You watch the firelight flicker against the tavern walls, casting shifting shadows that seem to dance with the rhythm of the rain. The talk turns to stories, of villages refusing to obey, of workers vanishing into the forests, of manor lands lying fallow because no one will tend them. Each tale carries both fear and hope, as though rebellion and ruin now walk hand in hand. The next morning you walk past the manor at the edge of the fields. Its walls are tall, but they seem smaller now somehow. The windows are dark. You can see the Lord's steward standing by the gate, scanning the horizon as if looking for men who will not come. His cloak is fine, but his face is lined with worry. For the first time you realize they are afraid too. The old balance of power, so certain and immovable before the plague, now teeters like a cart on a broken axle. The Lords write laws, but the fields do not obey parchment. The land demands hands, and there are too few to serve. As you continue your walk, the sound of the wind grows louder, sweeping through the wheat that's begun to grow again in patches of gold and green. The sky clears slowly, and a thin light spreads across the countryside. You stop for a moment, breathing it in. There is beauty in this fragile world, a beauty that even fear cannot erase. The land still breathes, the rivers still flow, and life, though changed, continues. By evening, you return home tired but thoughtful. The fire burns low, the smell of wood smoke curling through the room. You sit quietly, listening to the faint sounds outside, a dog barking, a door closing, the steady heartbeat of the wind. You think of the king in his distant hall, writing laws for people he will never see, and you wonder if he knows what it feels like to dig your hands into the soil, to rebuild from ashes, to carry the memory of loss in your very bones. Perhaps he does not. Perhaps no one in the high places truly understands what has happened below. You lie down, your eyes heavy, your mind full of questions. The rain begins again, tapping softly against the window. It sounds like a lullaby, gentle, endless, soothing, and as you drift towards sleep, you sense it, a kingdom uneasy, a future uncertain, a people slowly awakening. The laws may bind the body, but they cannot silence the earth's quiet promise that change, once begun, cannot be undone. The sun rises pale and tired, like an old candle burning low. You wake to the soft murmur of wind slipping through the cracks in your door and the distant rhythm of footsteps on the dirt road outside. Travelers again, more and more of them these days. When you open the door, the morning greets you with a faint chill. Mist clings to the ground, curling around the stones like breath made visible. A faint smell of smoke lingers, not from fire or ruin, but from cooking fires, from life. The roads that once lay empty are now alive with quiet motion. You see them as you step out, men and women walking with small bundles on their backs, faces drawn and weary, clothes patched and faded. Some push carts with creaking wheels. Others lead thin donkeys or carry infants wrapped in worn blankets. They are wanderers, laborers, families, survivors. People like you, seeking what little work or kindness the new world has to offer. The air hums with footsteps and murmured voices. No one travels with certainty anymore. Everyone moves on the same current of hope and hunger. The plague has made them rootless, and the new laws have left them restless. Villages once proud and closed off now watch the roads with both pity and suspicion. You walk with them for a while, your boots stirring dust. The road winds through open fields and broken hedges, past cottages whose chimneys smoke faintly in the cold. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, not for death this time, but for mass, for prayer, for life continuing. The sound feels strange, beautiful, and fragile. You fall into step beside a man with gray hair and kind eyes. His name is Robert, a mason once before his town emptied. He carries a hammer and chisel wrapped in cloth, the tools of a trade few can afford to hire now. He speaks softly, his voice worn thin by distance. "Everywhere I go," he says, "there are walls that need mending, and no one left to mend them." You walk together through the morning, sharing stories of the villages you've passed, the kindness of strangers, the silence of abandoned homes. He tells you of a manor where the Lord paid fair wages and offered food for every worker who came. He tells you of another, not far from there, where guards turned beggars away with whips. The world, it seems, is divided between mercy and fear. By midday, the mist has burned away, and the road glows under the sun. The smell of wildflowers rises from the ditches, mingling with the scent of sweat and dust. Your stomach growls softly. Hunger is a companion now, not cruel, but constant. You share a crust of bread with Robert, and he laughs quietly. "Never thought I'd see the day," he says, "when a day's work might earn more freedom than a lifetime of loyalty." His words linger as you walk. There's truth in them, the kind that hums quietly beneath the surface of things. People have begun to realize that life, once measured in service and obedience, now bends in new directions. There's danger in that realization, but also light. When evening falls, you come upon a small camp by the roadside. A handful of travelers sit around a fire, their faces glowing in the orange light. Someone is cooking stew in a dented pot. The smell of onions and herbs drifts through the air, comforting and real. You and Robert join them, and the group makes space without question. You sit beneath the open sky, eating slowly, listening to the low murmur of conversation. Someone hums a tune, a lullaby maybe from a forgotten village. The sound mingles with the crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of wind in the trees. In that moment, the road doesn't feel lonely. It feels like a thread, weaving scattered lives into a shared story. Later, as the fire dies down, a woman across the circle begins to speak. Her name is Margaret. Her husband was a reeve once, an overseer on a manor, but he fell ill during the pestilence. She speaks softly, staring into the embers. "I used to fear leaving the land," she says. "Now I think the land has left us." Her words are quiet, but they echo in the stillness. The land, once everything, now feels unmoored, belonging to no one and everyone at once. The laws say one thing, but hunger and hope write another. As the stars bloom across the dark sky, you lie down on the cool ground. The scent of earth rises up, rich and familiar. The world feels vast, almost too vast, but not empty anymore. You listen to the steady breathing of the others around you, the faint crackle of the dying fire, and somewhere far off, the sound of a night bird calling. Tomorrow, you'll walk again, perhaps north, toward the manor that pays fair wages, perhaps east, toward the towns where trade is stirring again. No one knows where the road leads now, only that it must be followed. You close your eyes, the night air cool against your face. The stars seem endless, scattered like seeds across the sky, and as you drift toward sleep, you realize the world is broken, yes, but in its cracks, something new is taking root, a freedom born not from permission, but from survival. The roads of hope and hunger stretch on, carrying those who dare to walk toward a world still learning how to begin again. The morning breaks with a silver light, the kind that makes the cobblestones shimmer and the rooftops glow like quiet embers. You've reached a town at last, not large, but alive. The road behind you lies silent and soft beneath the mist, and before you stretches a place that hums with cautious renewal. You step through its wooden gate as the air fills with the sound of footsteps, of laughter, of trade returning. It feels strange at first, hearing voices again after so many silent fields. Bells ring faintly from a church tower, calling the living to prayer. The smell of baking bread drifts from somewhere nearby, warm, yeasty, alive. For a moment you simply stand and breathe it in. The marketplace spreads before you like a painting of color and movement. Stalls lean slightly to one side, their canvas flaps fluttering in the soft breeze. Traders call out in voices that crack with both hope and weariness. Chickens cluck in wicker cages. A blacksmith hammers at a dull red horseshoe, his anvil ringing like a slow heartbeat through the square. Children dart between the stalls, barefoot and laughing, their joy piercing the heavy air like sunlight through clouds. The plague has changed everything, even here. Many shops stand empty, their shutters marked with faded crosses. The streets are wider now, not because they were rebuilt, but because so few remain to fill them. Yet the town breathes again, awkwardly, beautifully, like a body healing from a long illness. You wander slowly through the market, touching the rough grain of wood, the cool curve of a jug, the soft weave of cloth. A woman behind a stall offers you apples, small, misshapen things, but their scent is sharp and sweet. You buy two, paying with one of the silver coins you earned in the fields. She nods with quiet gratitude, and you sense the same understanding in her that lives within you, the shared relief of simply surviving. As you eat, you listen. The voices around you tell stories, of trade routes opening again, of merchants returning from the coast, of guilds struggling to reform after losing their members. There's talk of opportunity, whispered with both hope and guilt. So many have died that even the humblest of craftsmen can now find work. The guild halls, once proud and exclusive, have begun to open their doors wider. Apprentices are fewer, masters rarer still. The careful balance of skill and secrecy that once guarded each trade is unraveling. A new world is forming, one in which skill, not birth, begins to matter most. You pass a group of weavers working outside their shop. The air smells of dye and wet wool. Their hands move deftly, threading the shuttle through the loom's wooden frame, the rhythmic sound like rain against a roof. One of them, a young woman with a scarf wrapped over her hair, glances up and meets your eyes. She smiles faintly. "There's always work," she says, her voice soft but steady. "If you know how to do something well." You nod, though you're not sure yet what it is you can do well. By midday, the town has fully awakened. The streets echo with the clatter of carts, the murmur of voices, the cries of vendors calling out prices. It feels alive in a way that the countryside does not. Busy, crowded, uncertain, but alive all the same. You stop by a small fountain, watching the sunlight dance on the rippling surface. Children toss pebbles in, making wishes. You wonder what they wish for. A world without sickness, perhaps, or simply a full meal. As the day wears on, you find yourself drawn to a small inn near the market's edge. Its sign, painted with a faded image of a stag, creaks gently in the wind. Inside, the air is warm and thick with the scent of stew and smoke. You take a seat near the window, where the light falls softly on the wooden table. The innkeeper brings you a bowl of food, lentils, onions, and bread, simple but rich after days on the road. Around you, conversations rise and fall like waves. Merchants discussing prices. Carpenters offering their skills. A priest speaking softly of rebuilding the church roof. Every word feels touched by both loss and renewal. You realize as you listen that something profound is happening here. The town is not merely returning to what it was. It is becoming something else entirely. The old hierarchies, weakened by death and distance, no longer hold the same power. In their place, skill and need intertwine. Laborers become artisans. Women take up trades once denied to them. Children learn not from masters but from survival itself. As evening falls, you step outside once more. The air has cooled, carrying the scent of rain and iron. The marketplace has quieted. The stalls are being packed away. A few torches flicker along the streets, their flames wavering in the breeze. You walk through the fading light, your boots echoing softly on the stones. Somewhere, a lute begins to play, slow, wistful notes drifting from an open window. The melody weaves through the night like a memory of peace. You stop to listen, leaning against a wall, watching as lanterns begin to glow one by one. The town feels warm now, alive with quiet resilience. The Black Death took much, but it could not take the will to create, to rebuild, to trade, to live. You find a small room above the inn, a bed of straw, a blanket rough but clean. As you lie down, the sounds of the town murmur below, laughter, footsteps, the low creak of shutters. You close your eyes, the scent of smoke and bread lingering in the air. Tomorrow, you'll wake in a place that feels new, not entirely safe, but full of possibility. And as you drift toward sleep, you understand that towns, like people, learn to heal not by forgetting the past, but by weaving something new from its threads. The towns are reborn, their streets carrying both the ghosts of the dead and the footsteps of a world learning to live again. The morning opens quietly, a soft haze of gold and gray spreading over the rooftops. The streets are damp with dew, the cobblestones slick beneath your boots. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls, slow and hollow, its echo drifting through the waking town. The air smells of smoke, bread, and faint traces of lavender, a scent that clings to the robes of those who tend to the sick, or once did. You walk through the narrow lanes as the first light touches the windows. Women move through the mist like silhouettes, silent and steady. Some carry baskets of bread or herbs. Others sweep the thresholds of their homes. They work quietly, their movements practiced and purposeful. The world has changed, and with it, their place within it. The plague took fathers, sons, husbands, entire households undone in weeks. But the women remained. Some buried their loved ones and learned to live alone. Others stepped into work that had never before been theirs. They became healers, midwives, merchants, brewers, and weavers. The emptiness left by loss has become their space to rebuild. You pass a small square where a group of women tend a communal garden. The soil is dark, rich, and freshly turned. The smell of rosemary and mint fills the air as they prune and gather herbs. Their laughter is soft, almost shy, as if they are still learning what it means to feel joy again. One of them looks up, a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her hair and hands stained with earth. She smiles faintly. "Things grow again," she says, "even after so much dying." Her words hang in the morning light, simple and profound. You kneel beside her, watching as she cuts a sprig of sage. The leaves glisten with dew, their fragrance sharp and clean. She explains how they use the herbs to treat coughs, fevers, wounds, remnants of the knowledge passed down by healers who came before, by mothers and grandmothers who learned through trial and pain. In the towns and villages, such women have become the quiet backbone of survival. They are the ones who understand how to keep life moving, how to tend a wound, mend a roof, brew ale, or guide a child into a world reshaped by death. You continue walking, your path winding toward the market where the day's trade is beginning. There you see more women at work. A widow selling candles, her face pale but her eyes steady. A young girl shaping clay into bowls. Two sisters sewing garments by a window where sunlight spills like honey. The sound of their work, the scrape of scissors, the hum of thread through fabric, the creak of baskets being set down, becomes a kind of music, a rhythm of endurance. Inside a nearby church, the light falls through colored glass, painting the stone floor with soft hues of red and blue. You step in quietly and find a woman kneeling near the altar, her hands clasped in prayer. You recognize her. She was once the wife of the town baker, now gone. She prays not for the dead, but for strength. When she rises, her face glows faintly in the morning light. We do not wait for the world to return, she says softly. We make a new one. Outside, the town hums with life. Women's voices fill the air, calm, practical, unyielding. They bargain with merchants, mend torn clothes, share food among neighbors. Their lives are a tapestry of small acts of persistence. No proclamations, no speeches, only the daily rhythm of doing what must be done. As the day passes, you notice how naturally people turn to them now, for medicine, for food, for wisdom. Authority has shifted quietly, almost invisibly. Where once power rested in men's hands, lords, priests, guild masters, now it finds a gentler, steadier form. You visit a small cottage at the edge of town. Inside, a healer named Alice tends to a fevered child. The room smells of chamomile and smoke. She moves with calm precision, her hands sure and gentle. She crushes herbs with a stone mortar, murmuring to herself as she works. You watch as she places a cool cloth on the child's forehead, her expression one of unwavering focus. When she notices you, she smiles, tired but kind. I used to bake bread, she says quietly. Now I heal. The world tells us what it needs if we listen. Her words linger with you long after you leave. By dusk, the sky turns copper, and the town's small fires begin to flicker to life. The sound of laughter and soft conversation drifts from open doors. Women sit together outside their homes, mending clothes by candlelight, their shadows long against the walls. They talk about prices, harvests, and memories. Their voices are warm, threaded with sorrow but also strength. You pass by slowly, listening. The light from their candles glows like stars fallen to the earth. The world that nearly ended now rests in their hands, in their patience, their care, their quiet resolve. As night deepens, you return to your room above the inn. The air smells faintly of smoke and rain. Through the window, you see the faint shimmer of the moon over the rooftops. You think of all the women you saw today, the healers, the widows, the workers, and how their quiet labor has rebuilt more than walls or markets. It has rebuilt the heartbeat of life itself. You lie back, listening to the muffled hum of the town below, the lull of distant laughter, the faint creak of wood, the whisper of the wind. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize that history often forgets the quiet voices, but it is they who carry the world forward when all else falls silent. In the stillness after the plague, it is the women who keep the flame alive, steady, unseen and unbroken. The morning mist is thick again, curling over the fields like breath from a sleeping giant. You walk along a dirt path that leads toward the town's old church, its spire rising pale and solemn against the washed-out sky. The bells are silent today. The air carries the scent of wet earth, wax, and distant incense, faint traces of faith lingering like memories. The church doors stand open, their wood darkened by rain. As you step inside, the sound of the world fades away. The air grows cool and still, heavy with echoes. Candles flicker in small pools of gold, their flames bending and straightening as though whispering in the hush. The stone beneath your feet is worn smooth by generations of pilgrims, yet it feels lonely now. Too wide, too quiet. You sit near the back pew, your eyes adjusting to the dim light. Sunlight filters through colored glass, painting soft ribbons of blue and crimson across the floor. The scenes on the windows, saints, angels, suffering, salvation, tell stories that once comforted the living. But now they seem quieter, as if the saints themselves have fallen into contemplation. A priest moves slowly through the aisles, his robes brushing the stone. He is older than the plague, his face lined like parchment, his steps careful. When he reaches the altar, he kneels, his hands trembling slightly as he lights another candle. You hear his whisper, not in Latin, not in formality, but in plain speech. Forgive us for what we could not save. You close your eyes. The sound of his prayer fades into the stillness, blending with the faint crackle of candle flames. Outside, crows call from the steeple. The scent of beeswax and old smoke fills your lungs. When you open your eyes again, a few others have entered. A handful of townspeople. A mother with 2 children, a man in a black coat, an old woman carrying a small loaf of bread. They kneel silently, each lost in their own thoughts. You notice how their prayers are not spoken aloud anymore. They are quiet things now, whispered, internal, shaped by loss and weariness. You watch the priest as he rises and begins his sermon. His voice is soft, almost uncertain. Once we thought faith was protection, he says, eyes unfocused. But perhaps faith is something smaller and greater, to keep walking when there is no promise of safety, to keep lighting candles even when no one is left to see them burn. His words settle in the air like dust. You feel them sink into you, not as answers, but as comfort. Outside, when you step back into the daylight, the church bells begin to ring. Slow, deep, resonant. The sound spreads across the town, rolling over rooftops and through empty lanes. For a moment, it feels like the world itself pauses to listen. You wander through the graveyard behind the church, where thousands now rest beneath simple wooden crosses. The grass has grown thick between the graves. The wind moves through it, whispering softly. You kneel beside one, the name half faded, and brush your hand across the carving. The wood is damp, the letters rough beneath your fingertips. You think of how many prayers have been said here, and how many unanswered. A monk approaches carrying a basket of candles. He places them one by one at the foot of the graves, lighting each carefully. You ask him why he continues even after so many years. He smiles faintly, his eyes calm. Because silence is also a kind of prayer, he says. And the dead. They still listen. The wind rises, carrying his words through the grass. You continue walking among the graves as the sky clears. The sunlight returns, pale, hesitant, but warm. You notice that the people coming to pray now are not only the faithful. There are merchants, widows, farmers, even those who once turned away from the church. It's as though everyone, after so much death, has begun to reach again for something beyond themselves. Not out of fear, but longing. Inside the church once more, the priest has set up a long table of offerings. Not coins or relics, but food, bread, cheese, herbs, small bundles of wool. The community has begun to use the church not only as a place of prayer, but of care. The poor eat here. The sick are tended. The lonely find warmth. The walls that once echoed with sermons now hum with quiet conversation. Children's laughter returns to the aisles. The church, once a monument to divine authority, has become something humbler and holier for it. You sit near the door watching the light shift across the faces of those inside. There is something new here, something different from before the plague. Faith has changed. It is no longer blind obedience. It is compassion, lived, shared, unspoken. As dusk falls, the candles burn lower. You can hear the rain beginning again outside. Soft and rhythmic, a lullaby for the weary. The priest moves through the pews, snuffing out the flames one by one. When he reaches the last candle, he hesitates, then leaves it burning. You understand why. When you finally step outside, the air smells of rain and stone. The world feels heavier but also gentler, like a sigh released after years of holding breath. The bells toll once more, not in mourning, but in remembrance. And you realize that faith has survived, not through miracles or divine signs, but through small acts of light in the darkness. As you walk back through the misty streets, your steps slow and measured, you think of the priest's words. You think of how belief, like a flame, can burn low but never die. And as night settles over the quiet town, you whisper to yourself, in the silence after the storm, the truest prayers are the ones that never need words. The dawn comes slowly, as if uncertain whether it should rise. A thin silver mist blankets the fields, softening the world into shades of gray and pale gold. You hear the faint distant call of a rooster, the bleating of sheep from somewhere beyond the hills. The scent of damp grass and morning smoke fills the air, the kind of smell that feels both alive and ancient. You walk toward the village school, a modest wooden hall beside a well, its roof patched with straw, its walls worn smooth by time. The laughter of children carries through the mist like birdsong. It is a strange and beautiful sound, one that had been missing for too many years. After the plague, many thought laughter would never return. The world had been emptied of it, replaced by silence and fear. But time has a way of mending even the quietest wounds. The children who were born after the great dying have never seen the streets lined with corpses. They have not heard the wails of the dying echoing through the night. They know only stories, fragments told in hushed tones, half believed, half forgotten. You stand by the doorway, watching them. Some sit cross-legged on the dirt floor, tracing letters into wooden slates with small sticks. Others chase each other outside, their shouts bright and wild in the crisp morning air. A young girl with dark curls is teaching a smaller boy how to write his name. She whispers the letters carefully, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. When he finally manages to scrawl his name, crooked and proud, she grins, a wide, radiant grin that seems to light up the entire room. The schoolteacher, a woman named Margaret, moves among them, her hands stained with ink and chalk. Her face bears quiet lines of exhaustion, but also of peace. She was one of the few adults who survived the plague's worst year, and now she teaches the new generation everything she knows, reading, counting, and the stories of a world that once was. You sit beside her, listening as she reads aloud from a small, tattered book. The children gather close, eyes wide. This was London, she says softly. A city so large that you could walk all day and never see its end. People filled the streets, merchants, bakers, scholars, and children like you. But then came the great sickness. Her voice trails off. The children glance at one another, silent for a heartbeat. Then the smallest boy raises his hand. "Did it eat them?" he asks in a whisper. Margaret smiles gently. "No, child. Not like a monster. It was something smaller than we could see. Something that made people sleep and never wake again." The boy frowns, as if trying to imagine a monster made of air. You feel the weight of her words settle softly in the room. Not fear, but curiosity. The children have grown up with ghosts of the past around them, yet they do not tremble. The plague to them is not a memory of pain, but a story of survival. Outside, you wander through the village square. The sound of hammers and saws rings out. Men rebuilding homes, young apprentices shaping wood into carts and tables. A group of children sits near the fountain, sculpting little figures from mud. One of them holds up his creation, a knight with a wooden sword, and declares it the savior of the village. The others cheer, their laughter echoing against the walls. You notice how differently they play now. Before, children mimicked battles or kings. Now, their games are about healing, rebuilding, protecting. Their heroes are farmers, doctors, and healers, the ones who make life, not those who take it. A girl nearby gathers wildflowers into a crown, weaving stems together with careful fingers. When she finishes, she places it gently on the head of a small wooden statue by the well, a makeshift saint carved by the townsfolk. The petals gleam bright against the worn wood. You realize that even in play, these children are honoring what their elders endured. As midday comes, the air warms. The scent of baking bread drifts from nearby houses. You pass by a family sitting outside, sharing a loaf still steaming from the oven. A boy offers you a piece, small but freely given. His mother smiles and nods, a gesture of quiet hospitality. You taste it, soft, earthy, faintly sweet. Bread, once scarce and precious, now shared without hesitation. In the afternoon, the children gather by the river. The water runs clear again, no longer poisoned by the waste of cities. They skip stones, splash, and shout. Their laughter fills the valley, bouncing off the hillsides like a promise. You sit beneath a willow, the shade cool on your skin. The sun glitters across the ripples, and for a long moment, you simply watch. The sunlight dancing, the air full of joy, the world alive again. You think of how, not so long ago, this same river carried death, bodies cast adrift by frightened hands. Now it carries only the echoes of laughter and the reflection of a bright blue sky. Later, as the sun dips low, you walk back toward the village. The schoolhouse door stands open. Inside, Margaret writes on a slate, her pupils repeating after her. "Hope," she says. Their voices rise in a gentle chorus. Hope. You close your eyes, letting the word wash over you. It feels like a spell, simple and ancient. The kind of word that can build a world. When the lesson ends, the children file out into the fading light. Some wave to you as they pass. Quick smiles, small hands raised in farewell. You walk with them down the lane, past gardens heavy with the scent of thyme and basil, past windows glowing with candlelight. The older ones carry their siblings on their backs. They speak softly to one another, sharing secrets and songs. You realize that these children, untouched by the memory of death, carry something even greater than survival. They carry innocence reborn. They will grow up in a world shaped by loss, but not defined by it. At the edge of the village, an old woman sits spinning wool. She watches the children pass and murmurs to you, "They do not remember the plague, and that is good. The world must not always remember its pain." You nod, watching as the children disappear into the twilight. Their voices fade into the distance, a soft hum of life that fills the quiet evening. The air cools. The sky turns violet, then deep blue. A single star appears above the horizon. You stand there for a long while, listening to the night settle in. The chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the gentle lapping of the river against its banks. You think of the children, their laughter, their small hands, their eager eyes, and you understand that history, no matter how dark, always plants seeds for the future. These children are the green shoots rising from the ashes. They will build cathedrals again, write songs again, fall in love again. And when they look back, the plague will be a whisper, not a wound. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air is cool and clean. Somewhere a lullaby drifts through an open window, a mother's soft voice carrying through the night, and as the last light fades, you realize something gentle and profound. The world has not only survived, it has learned to dream again. In the laughter of children, the earth remembers how to heal. The sun rises over the city ruins like a hesitant flame. Its pale light creeps across collapsed roofs and broken cobblestones, touching what once was, the bones of a civilization waiting to live again. You stand at the edge of the road, the wind tugging at your cloak, carrying the mingled scents of dust, smoke, and the faint sweetness of blooming weeds pushing through cracks in the stone. Once this place had been a heartbeat. Crowded markets, ringing bells, the laughter of thousands echoing between tall, proud walls. Then came the silence. Then came the years when only the crows and the wind walked these streets. Now you can feel something stirring, slow, fragile, but real. You take a few steps forward. Your boots scrape against stone, and the sound echoes through the empty square like the first voice in a long-forgotten song. Around you, small groups of people work among the ruins. You see a mason lifting bricks, his hands calloused but steady. A woman sweeps debris from the threshold of a half-collapsed shop. Children chase each other through the dust, their laughter rising bright and pure, a defiant sound against the ghosts that linger. The smell of wood smoke curls through the air as you turn a corner. Men are rebuilding a tavern wall with rough-hewn beams. The rhythmic clack of hammers fills the air. Thud, 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 a heartbeat returned to stone. The city breathes again, through labor, through persistence. You pause beside a fountain. Once it had run with clear water. During the plague, it had been a gathering place for the desperate. Now it trickles again, faint but steady. Moss grows between the stones, and wildflowers spill over its edges. You kneel and dip your fingers into the cool water. It smells of earth and iron, but it feels alive. As you walk deeper into the heart of the city, the rhythm of renewal surrounds you. Carpenters' saws whine, voices call to one another over the clang of metal and the creak of carts. The narrow alleys are still scarred by the past, scorch marks on walls, boarded windows, doors that will never open again. Yet between them, new life threads its way through the cracks. At a small marketplace, you stop to watch. A handful of merchants have set up makeshift stalls beneath faded awnings. They sell bread, pottery, wool, even a few bright apples that gleam like jewels against the rough wood. The air hums with soft conversation and the faint scent of yeast and spice. You hear a woman laugh, a sound that makes others pause and smile. It feels like something sacred, that laugh. A sound that had been missing from the earth. A young boy offers you a small loaf of bread. You take it, still warm, the crust crisp beneath your fingers. It tastes simple, flour, salt, smoke, yet it carries the memory of survival. Later, you walk toward the cathedral. Its spire still stands, though cracked. The bells, long silent, hang heavy and dust-covered. Inside, you find artisans painting over soot-stained walls, their brushes slow and reverent. The smell of oil and pigment mingles with candle wax and old stone. One of them, an old man with trembling hands, paints a field of golden wheat onto the wall. "It's for the harvest that came after," he says softly, not looking up, "so that they remember, not only the death, but what followed." You nod and stand for a while, watching the golden fields bloom beneath his brush. The image glows faintly in the dim light, a symbol of life reborn. Outside, you hear church bells, not the cathedrals, but smaller ones ringing from the far end of the city. Their tones are uneven, hesitant, but together they form something beautiful. It's not celebration, it's remembrance. And yet the sound fills you with quiet hope. You continue wandering, your steps slow and thoughtful. The streets, though changed, feel alive again. The smell of freshly cut wood and lime plaster fills the air. You see a young couple planting flowers in front of their rebuilt home, small yellow blooms that catch the sunlight. A baker sets out his first batch of pastries, their scent drifting through the square. Children draw chalk lines on the walls, marking where their homes once stood, now being raised anew. Everywhere, you notice signs of adaptation. People build differently now. Homes spaced wider apart, with windows that open to the wind. Wells are dug deeper. Waste is carried outside the walls instead of into the gutters. It is as if the city itself has learned from its suffering. Humanity has changed not just its heart, but its architecture. As evening falls, the sky deepens into amber and violet. The city glows with the warmth of firelight, candles flickering in windows, lanterns hanging from beams, torches burning along the rebuilt streets. The smell of roasted grain and smoke drifts from every corner. You find yourself drawn toward the marketplace again, where people gather around small fires, sharing food and stories. An old man strums a lute, his voice weathered but tender. The song he sings is simple, a tune about loss, about rebuilding, about the stubborn will to begin again. The people listen quietly, their faces reflecting the fire's gentle glow. Then, one by one, they begin to hum along. The song spreads through the square, soft at first, then stronger. It weaves through the streets, between the walls, rising toward the night sky. For the first time in decades, the city is not silent. It sings. You sit beside the fountain once more, the same one you touched that morning. The water catches the light of the fires and the stars, shimmering like liquid gold. You hear laughter echoing faintly through the streets, and the distant hum of rebuilding continues even as the night deepens. You tilt your head back and look at the sky. It is wide, clear, infinite. The same sky that once watched the city die, now watching it live again. A gentle breeze brushes your face, cool and smelling faintly of ash and spring flowers. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the footsteps, the hammering, the voices, the soft music. Every sound feels like a heartbeat. The city that had once been a grave is alive again, breathing softly beneath the stars. And in that quiet, you realize something profound. Death had not ended the world. It had only forced it to start anew, slower, wiser, more tender. Humanity had learned to build not for grandeur, but for endurance. As you rise to leave, you whisper to yourself, the streets remember, the walls remember, and yet they forgive. The night settles deep around you. The fires burn low, but beneath the calm, you can feel it, the pulse of a living city, steady and sure. The world has taken a breath again. The cities once filled with sorrow now hum with the quiet rhythm of rebirth. Not loud, not proud, but alive. The morning opens with soft light, spreading across the rebuilt city like a whisper of warmth. You can hear the gentle rustle of cloth from the open-air market, the distant clink of hammers shaping stone, and somewhere, the faint notes of a flute, tentative, searching, as if rediscovering its voice after years of silence. You follow the music through narrow streets until you find its source. A young man seated on a low wall, his back to the rising sun. His flute gleams faintly in the golden light, the melody slow and melancholic. Around him, a few passers-by have stopped to listen. No one speaks. The tune drifts through the morning air, weaving itself into the hum of life. A sound the world had forgotten it needed. For years after the plague, art had vanished. Painters set down their brushes, poets fell silent, and songs turned into morning prayers. What was beauty, they had thought, in a world that had watched itself decay? But slowly, as the years stretched forward, color began to return. You walk on, and you see it everywhere now. On the walls, in the markets, in the quiet corners where hands work in rhythm with the heart. Murals bloom where ash once clung. The smell of pigment, sharp and earthy, fills the air. Artisans grind ochre and vermilion, stirring life into the dull grays of stone. In one courtyard, a painter named Tomas works beside a wide sheet of plaster, sunlight falling over his shoulders. His fingers are stained in every shade imaginable: crimson, cobalt, gold. His brush moves with slow reverence, tracing a figure of a woman sowing seeds into dark soil. He doesn't look up as he speaks. "It is not beauty we paint anymore," he says. "It is memory and mercy." You watch him for a long time. The figure on the wall seems to glow, her hands scattering life into barren ground. Around you, people pause to look, some crossing themselves, others smiling quietly. The air smells of lime, dust, and the faint sweetness of oil paint. Later, you wander through the artisans' quarter, where workshops have reopened. You hear the soft scrape of chisels carving new statues, the rhythmic clatter of looms weaving bright fabrics. You pass a group of young girls dipping brushes into bowls of color, painting delicate flowers on clay bowls. Their laughter rises above the sound of bristles brushing glaze. Art has returned not in grand cathedrals, but in homes, in doorways, in the smallest of places. It lives now in quilts, in carved spoons, in songs sung at twilight. The people no longer make art for kings or churches. They make it for each other. As evening nears, you climb a hill overlooking the city. Below, you see banners fluttering in soft hues, new frescoes glowing in the fading light. The rooftops shimmer like embers in the sunset. A soft wind rises, carrying the scent of wet paint, bread, and evening fires. You close your eyes, and the world feels full again, of sound, of color, of the gentle hum of creation. In the hush of twilight, you understand that art was never just decoration. It was remembrance, the way humanity told itself, "We are still here." And as night falls, the flute you heard that morning begins again. This time, not mournful, but alive, filled with hope. The melody drifts upward, mingling with the stars. Where once there was silence, now there is song. Where once there was ash, now there is color. The dawn is quiet, the air crisp and still. The first light touches the rooftops and glimmers across the river, turning the surface silver. You walk along the bank, where willows trail their long fingers into the current. The city stirs awake behind you, carts creaking, footsteps echoing, voices calling softly to one another. The people have begun to gather in the square, not for a sermon nor for a royal decree, but for something simpler, a meeting. A coming together of hands and hearts. In the years after the plague, the old order had faltered. Kings and bishops had hidden in their manners, their prayers and commands unable to stop death. When the dust settled, it was the common people who had remained: farmers, healers, carpenters, mothers. They rebuilt the walls, the fields, the homes. They held each other through the long winters, and so now, as life returns, faith no longer belongs to crowns or crosses alone. It belongs to people, to the simple belief that humanity itself, fragile and flawed, can still choose kindness. You stand at the edge of the crowd, listening. A woman speaks first, her hands rough from work, her hair streaked with gray. She talks of harvests, of sharing grain between villages so no one will starve again. A blacksmith suggests building a communal forge where anyone can repair their tools without cost. A young man proposes a new festival, not of saints or rulers, but of the living, to honor survival itself. Their words ripple through the crowd, and you can feel it, that hum of something ancient and new at once. Unity, trust, the soft, stubborn pulse of hope. Nearby, a boy releases a small bird he had nursed back to health. It flutters clumsily into the air, circling once before vanishing into the pale blue sky. A cheer rises from the people, brief but pure. As the day unfolds, the city becomes a living symphony of cooperation. People work together, raising beams, planting trees, mending walls. The smell of sawdust and fresh bread fills the air. You pass a group of women sewing blankets for orphans, their laughter mingling with the hiss of thread through fabric. A group of men are digging a new well, their rhythm steady and sure. It is not charity, it is shared strength. You stop at a long wooden table set up beneath an elm tree. Bowls of stew, loaves of bread, cups of cider, all free, all shared. A little girl offers you a cup with both hands, her smile shy but bright. When you drink, the warmth spreads through you, deeper than hunger. In the distance, the old cathedral bells begin to ring, but no one turns toward them. Instead, the crowd continues its work, its laughter, its living. The bells are no longer commands. They are simply part of the soundscape, like birdsong or rain. You wander through the market at dusk. The sky glows gold and rose, the light falling soft across faces tired but content. You notice small gestures everywhere. A stranger helping an old man lift his sack of flour, a mother braiding her daughter's hair as they walk home, a young couple sharing a cloak against the evening chill. The plague had stripped humanity to its bones. Now flesh and warmth are returning, not through power, but through compassion. You find a bench and sit for a while. The stars begin to appear, one by one, faint glimmers in the deepening sky. Somewhere, a musician begins to play. A slow, steady tune, neither happy nor sad, just human. Around you, the murmur of life continues, the heartbeat of a world that has finally remembered itself. You close your eyes, letting the sound settle inside you. The air smells of earth, smoke, and the faint sweetness of fruit. You think of all the people you've met, the healer, the widow, the children, the priest, and realize that every one of them has become part of this new faith. Not in gods, not in kings, but in one another. And as the night deepens, you whisper to yourself, perhaps this is what salvation truly means, not divine rescue, but human kindness. The stars shimmer above the sleeping city. The fires burn low. Somewhere a baby cries, and a mother's voice soothes it back to peace. The world feels alive again, imperfect and whole. In the ashes of despair, faith in one another became the holiest miracle of all. The road was once crowded with carts and the echo of hooves, merchants calling out their wares, children chasing the wheels of passing wagons. But now only the soft shuffle of footsteps fills the air. You listen to the sound, the crunch of gravel beneath boots, the slow creak of the mule's harness, the low hum of wind through the hedges. Every noise feels amplified, sacred almost, as if the silence of the past years has made the world more tender to sound. As you walk, the landscape unfolds in gentle waves, rolling meadows flecked with wildflowers, ruins of small cottages wrapped in ivy, lonely church spires rising from overgrown villages. Time has softened everything. Even destruction looks peaceful now. You pass a collapsed barn, its wooden beams silvered by rain, and a field once plowed by human hands now claimed by golden weeds. A small stream runs beside the road, its current glittering in the light. You kneel and touch the water. It's cold and clear, biting against your fingertips. When you lift your hand, droplets cling to your skin like tiny mirrors, trembling before they fall. The monk stops beside you, adjusting his satchel. His robe is faded, patched in several places, but his eyes are bright. It's strange, he says softly. The world looks healed, but it remembers. You nod. The earth remembers everything. Every footprint, every sorrow, every prayer whispered into the dirt. By midday, the sun burns through the mist, and the road leads to a small hamlet. You smell bread baking before you even see it, that warm, yeasty scent that feels like home, no matter where you are. Smoke curls from two chimneys. A group of children plays in the mud, laughing, their bare feet kicking up droplets of brown water. It feels almost like the world before. You and the other travelers stop at a stone well. A woman drawing water greets you with a weary but kind smile. Her hands are strong, her eyes steady. She tells you that her village was nearly empty 3 winters ago, but now people have begun to return, rebuilding, planting, learning how to live again. We lost everything, she says, tying her hair back. But the soil still remembers how to grow. Her words linger as you continue down the road. The afternoon sun grows softer, the shadows long. The merchant hums an old tune, something from before the plague, and the sound is almost like a prayer. You come upon an abandoned monastery at sunset. Its walls stand half broken, vines crawling up through the cracks. The travelers decide to rest here. You gather wood for a small fire, its orange glow flickering against the moss-covered stones. The monk sits cross-legged beside it, whispering verses from memory, his voice calm, almost melodic. The women prepare a stew from whatever they have, a few turnips, a scrap of dried meat, a pinch of herbs. The smell is faint but comforting. You eat slowly, the warmth spreading through you as the stars emerge one by one. Around the fire, the wanderers begin to share their stories. One woman speaks of losing her son, another of finding a stranger's child and raising him as her own. The merchant tells of cities where the streets are still empty, of graves stretching as far as the eye can see. Yet in every story, there is something new, a small spark of rebuilding, a hint of love reborn. You realize, listening to them, that humanity itself has become a caravan, moving, seeking, rebuilding wherever the road allows. The night deepens, the fire crackles softly, and the monk begins to sing a low, wordless hymn. It drifts upward, weaving through the air like smoke. The stars shimmer brighter, and for a moment you forget the losses. All that remains is the quiet strength of those who continue to walk. You lie back against the cool earth, the scent of smoke and damp grass around you. The sky stretches endlessly overhead, vast, eternal, patient, and as you close your eyes, the final thought that passes through you is simple, clear, and full of peace. Even after ruin, the road still leads forward. Morning comes slowly, carried on a mist that hovers above the land. You wake to the sound of birds, their songs delicate but confident, like the earth itself is clearing its throat after a long silence. The travelers are already packing up, the fire reduced to soft embers. The air is cool, the kind that bites gently against the skin, clean and full of promise. You walk again, and soon the hills open into wide plains, fields stretching far into the horizon. For years these lands had been abandoned. Crops had withered, plows rusted, and villages turned to dust. But now, green life is creeping back. You see wheat rising in soft waves, bending in the wind like rippling silk. The smell of fresh soil is rich and deep, that earthy perfume that comes only when something new is being born. A farmer stands at the edge of a field, leaning on his hoe. His clothes are patched, his hands thick with calluses, but his expression is proud. He waves you closer and offers a handful of barley grains. "It grows again," he says quietly, as if afraid to break the spell. You rub the grains between your fingers. They're warm from the sun, tiny symbols of hope. All around, people are working. Women scatter seeds from woven baskets. Men repair fences. Children chase one another through the furrows. You hear laughter, real laughter, deep and unrestrained, rising like birds into the open sky. The farmer tells you that after the plague, the land had lain fallow for years. When people began to return, they found the earth richer than before. Wildflowers had covered the soil, feeding it, healing it. Nature had used the silence to mend itself. Even when we vanished, he says, the world kept breathing. You walk through the fields as the day warms. Bees hum lazily between the blossoms. A warm breeze carries the scent of grass and sweat and sun. You close your eyes for a moment and it feels like the entire world is exhaling, a sigh of relief, of rebirth. By midday, you reach a small village that sits beside a river. The people have gathered for the harvest feast. Long tables are set in the open, covered in cloths of faded color. Bowls overflow with fruit, bread, and cheese. Someone pours wine into clay cups. There's music, a fiddle, a drum, the clap of hands. You sit among them, eating slowly, watching as they dance in a wide circle, their feet stirring the dust into the sunlight. Their faces glow, lined, weathered, but full of life. You notice how they look at the land, not as owners, but as partners. The earth has given them another chance, and they treat it with quiet reverence. Later, as dusk settles, you walk down to the river. The surface reflects the fading sky, streaks of pink and gold and violet. A little girl stands beside you, holding a stalk of wheat taller than herself. She looks up and says, "Mama says the land forgives." You smile, the words resting gently in your heart. Forgiveness, that's what this feels like. The world forgiving humanity for its mistakes, and humanity learning to forgive itself. The fields rustle softly in the evening wind, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Crickets begin to chirp and lanterns flicker to life in the village behind you. You stand there for a long time, watching the river flow, feeling the cool air brush against your skin. The plague had once stolen breath, color, and faith. But here in the green heart of the land, life has returned, humble, abundant, unafraid. As night deepens, you whisper to the fields, grow, remember, heal, and somewhere, beneath the soil, the roots answer, silent but sure. In the rhythm of the fields, the world finds its heartbeat once more. The morning light drifts through a thin veil of fog, soft and silver, spilling gently across the quiet countryside. The world feels almost fragile, as if it is learning how to be alive again. Cautious, careful, tender. You walk along a dirt path lined with wild mint and clover, their fragrance rising with the dew. The air is cool and heavy, but full of a certain sweetness that feels new. For years, the plague had not only ravaged bodies, it had hollowed out minds. Fear had become the air itself, seeping into every corner of thought. People had flinched at the sound of a cough, crossed the street to avoid their neighbors, prayed with trembling hands that touched no one. It had been a time when silence was safety and closeness was danger, but now, in the years after the last grave was filled and the last bell ceased its tolling, the mind began its slow, uncertain healing. You come upon a small village nestled between hills. The homes are modest, whitewashed walls, thatched roofs, thin curls of smoke rising from chimneys. Yet there is a strange peace here, a calm that feels deliberate. At the center of the village stands an old oak tree, broad and serene, its leaves whispering softly in the wind. Beneath it, a circle of people sit in the grass. They are not priests or nobles. They are villagers, farmers, midwives, old men with tired eyes. One woman sits with her hands clasped, eyes closed, breathing slowly. A young boy lies on his back watching the clouds. An old man hums something wordless and low. You realize they are not praying. They are simply being. A woman notices you and gestures for you to join. You sit beside her, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath you, the cool brush of air against your cheek. She tells you softly, "We call this the hour of stillness. Once a day," she explains. The village gathers beneath the oak tree, not to work, not to trade, not to speak of grief, but simply to exist together in quiet. After years of panic and loss, they learned that silence could heal differently. Not as the silence of death, but the silence of peace. You close your eyes and listen. You can hear the hum of bees, the distant bleating of sheep, the faint rustle of the tree above. Each sound feels magnified, distinct, like the world is whispering directly into your ear. Your breath slows. The tightness you hadn't realized was in your chest begins to loosen. The world no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a companion, ancient, forgiving. When the hour ends, the woman smiles and stands. "We lost half our people," she says. "But the ones who remain, we carry their memory by living without fear." Later, you walk with her through the village. She points to a small house at the edge of the field. "That's where we keep the memory books," she says. Inside, you find shelves filled with old leather-bound journals, some nearly crumbling, others newly written. Each book holds the stories of those who were lost. Their names, their favorite songs, their jokes, their kindnesses. She runs her fingers over one spine. At first, people wrote only their grief, but slowly they began to write gratitude. We learned that remembering isn't only about pain. It's also about what still remains. Outside, the light shifts, warmer now, golden. You walk through the fields with her as she gathers herbs, lavender for rest, rosemary for memory, chamomile for calm. She speaks of how the village began teaching the children to talk about fear, not to hide it, not to drown it in prayer, but to name it, understand it, and let it pass. "The plague taught us that fear spreads faster than disease," she says, "but kindness cures both." By afternoon, the village is alive with gentle sounds. The clatter of dishes, the chatter of children, the rhythmic tapping of a cobbler's hammer. Every sound feels deliberate, unhurried. There's no urgency anymore, no frantic rush to escape fate. Life has slowed, softened, become mindful. You sit by the well and watch as an old man carves a small wooden figure, a child's toy. His hands are steady, his expression serene. He looks up and says, "The mind heals when the hands are busy and the heart is quiet." Later, as evening falls, you follow a narrow path leading to a meadow. The sun is sinking low, turning the tall grass to liquid gold. You find a few villagers there, sitting around a small fire. Someone strums a lute. Another hums along. The song is slow, circular, repeating itself like the turning of the seasons. The woman from earlier sits beside you again. She watches the firelight dance across the faces of her friends. "When the sickness was at its worst," she says, "I used to dream that the sky had turned gray forever. I couldn't imagine the world in color again." She pauses, smiling faintly. Now every sunset feels like a promise kept. You watch as the last light fades beyond the hills, the fire flickering softly. The smell of smoke mingles with lavender carried by the breeze. Someone begins to tell a story, not of loss, but of beginnings, as darkness folds over the meadow. The sounds of the world settle into a lullaby. The crackle of fire, the murmur of voices, the slow pulse of a heart rediscovering calm. You feel something within you unclench, that old tension, that leftover dread from a time when every cough meant danger. The night sky is vast above you, deep and blue and endless. The stars blink slowly into view, patient and old. You breathe, and for the first time the air feels clean, not just in your lungs but in your thoughts. You realize that healing doesn't arrive like a miracle. It comes like this, slow, subtle, carried on shared silence and simple acts of care. You lie back on the grass, eyes half closed, the earth solid beneath you. The fire's warmth touches your face. Someone begins to hum again, that same soft melody, and it feels like a lullaby meant for the world itself. And as you drift towards sleep, one gentle truth rises from the quiet around you. The mind remembers pain, but the soul remembers peace. And slowly, gently, the two learn to meet again. The morning breaks in soft gold. Mist still clings to the meadows, and the air is filled with the scent of damp grass and wood smoke curling from chimneys. You hear laughter, high, clear, and bright, the kind that only belongs to children. It's a sound that had vanished for years, and now that it's returned, it fills the air like music, like hope given a voice. You follow the sound to a small clearing on the edge of the village. There, a group of children chase one another through the grass, their bare feet glistening with dew. They wear simple clothes, patched and faded, but their energy is boundless. One girl runs past you, hair streaming behind her like sunlight, holding a ribbon made of torn cloth. A boy follows, laughing so hard he stumbles into the flowers, rolling until his laughter turns breathless. You stand for a moment, simply watching. After years of plague, after nights filled with bells tolling and the scent of smoke and sickness, it feels impossible that such laughter could exist again. Yet here it is, alive, effortless, unstoppable. An older woman sits nearby beneath a birch tree, spinning wool on a small wheel. Her hands move with practiced rhythm, but her eyes never leave the children. She smiles softly when you approach. "They don't remember the plague," she says, her voice rough but warm. To them, it's just stories, dark tales told by candlelight to make them appreciate the sun. You sit beside her, and she tells you how the children were born in the years after the sickness, when the worst had passed and life began to mend itself. "We call them the renewal," she says. "The children of the second dawn. In the early years, few dared to have children. The memories were too fresh, the graves too new, the fear too deep. But time, as it always does, softened grief into courage. One by one, families began to grow again. Cradles were built, lullabies returned, and midwives once more carried candles through the night. The woman's spinning wheel hums, its steady sound blending with the chatter of sparrows and the distant creak of a mill. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm. Life returning in simple, perfect motion. She tells you that the children are different, not because of blood or birth, but because of the world they've inherited. They grow up knowing that life is fragile, but they do not fear it. They learn early to plant seeds, to tend animals, to share bread. They have seen no armies, no famine, no sickness. Their world, though scarred, is peaceful. And in that peace, their innocence feels almost holy. As the morning unfolds, the village awakens around them. Mothers call from doorways, fathers load carts for the fields, and the smell of baking bread spreads through the air. The children scatter, some helping, some exploring. You follow two of them as they wander toward the river. The river runs clear now, its surface shimmering with light. The children kneel at the edge, dropping pebbles and watching the ripples expand. One boy speaks in a serious tone. They say the river used to carry the sickness, he says. The girl beside him nods, eyes wide. My grandmother says it was black, and the fish died. You watch as the boy dips his hand into the water, letting it run through his fingers. It's clean now, he whispers. It forgave us. That word, forgave, and lingers in the air. You realize these children are growing in a world where forgiveness is part of the soil, part of the water, part of the sky. They do not remember fear. They only remember life. Later that day, the village gathers for the harvest blessing. It's not a church service anymore, not in the old sense. There is no priest, no sermon, just the people, the fields and the children standing at the front, holding baskets of wheat, apples, and flowers. An old man, once a healer, stands and speaks softly. These children are the proof that the world continues, he says. Where death once reigned, life insists on being born again. His voice trembles, but his smile is steady. The children step forward, placing their offerings on a long table draped in white linen. Some giggle, some whisper shyly to one another. Some simply stare in awe at the gathering. You can see it in their faces. The glow of a generation untouched by the shadow of plague, carrying light that the old could never fully hold again. After the ceremony, music begins, flutes, fiddles, and the beat of a drum. The children dance, spinning in circles, ribbons trailing behind them like streaks of color against the setting sun. Adults watch with quiet smiles, some with tears in their eyes. You feel something stir inside you, not just joy, but relief. These children are living what their parents only dreamed of. They are proof that humanity, though broken, never truly dies. As night falls, lanterns are lit along the streets. The village glows like a constellation. Families sit outside their homes, sharing stories while the children chase fireflies. The air smells of roasted grain and honey. Somewhere, a lullaby begins, slow and tender, sung by a mother rocking her infant beneath the stars. You walk toward the edge of the village, where the fields stretch into the distance. You can hear the laughter fading, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the soft rustle of the wind through the wheat. You pause, looking out at the horizon. The moon rises pale and full, casting silver light over everything. The children have gone quiet now, asleep in warm homes, dreaming in a world that finally feels safe. You realize that the plague's final lesson wasn't about death at all. It was about endurance, the human heart's refusal to stop loving, to stop creating, to stop believing in tomorrow. These children are that belief made flesh, their laughter the echo of a promise kept by the generations before them. You close your eyes, letting the night air brush against your face, cool and fragrant. You can still hear the faint hum of the spinning wheel from earlier, steady as the turning of time itself. And as the stars shimmer above, you think every cradle built after tragedy is a rebellion against despair. Every child born into silence is a hymn to life's return. The night deepens, and somewhere in the village, another child begins to cry, not in sorrow, but in the fierce, beautiful insistence of being alive. You smile softly to yourself, whispering into the dark. The world breathes again. The morning sun spills across the countryside like warm honey, spreading through the valleys and washing over the thatched rooftops. The air smells of wet earth and hay, and the sound of distant bells marks the beginning of another day. You stand on a small rise watching the fields below, endless rows of wheat swaying in rhythm with the wind. Men and women move among them, their voices low but content, their tools glinting in the soft light. It's a different world now, quieter, humbler, but fairer in ways that once seemed impossible. The old order, the rigid chain of lords and peasants, was broken not by swords or rebellions, but by silence, by the absence of the millions who once bowed their heads. The plague had taken so many that even the mighty could no longer demand labor with ease. The fields, the mills, the manors, all had stood empty, waiting for hands to return, and when they did return, the hands refused to kneel. You walk down the hill toward the village. The ground is soft beneath your boots, damp with dew. You pass a group of workers resting beside a cart piled high with sacks of grain. They're eating bread and cheese, laughing between bites. You notice how they speak to each other and freely as equals. There is no overseer, no harsh voice shouting orders. One man, his face browned by the sun, notices you watching and waves you over. "Come, traveler," he says, tearing a piece of bread in two. "You look like you could use a rest." You sit with them beneath a wide oak tree, the shade cool and dappled. The man introduces himself as Aldrich, a farmer, though his hands bear the marks of other trades, the calluses of a mason, the scars of a blacksmith. "We all learned more than one craft," he says, chuckling. "After the plague, there weren't enough of us left to do just one thing." He explains how everything changed in the years after the sickness. With so few laborers left, the surviving peasants began to demand better treatment, better pay, and freedom to move. "The lords tried to resist," Aldrich says. "But what's a lord with no one to plow his fields?" He smiles, eyes glinting with quiet pride. "Now we work for ourselves. We trade, we build. The land belongs to those who live on it, not those who hide behind stone walls." As he speaks, a cool breeze stirs the leaves, and for a moment you can almost hear the ghosts of the old world, the creak of wagons carrying taxes to manors, the cries of peasants working from dawn to dusk under the watch of men on horseback. But those sounds have faded now, replaced by something gentler. Laughter, song, the rhythmic hum of a world remade by its survivors. Later, Aldrich invites you to walk through his village. The streets are wide and open, lined with small cottages painted in soft colors. You see smiths hammering iron, women weaving cloth on looms set up in front of their homes, and children chasing chickens through the dust. At the edge of the square stands a new kind of hall, not a church, not a manor, but a meeting place built by the villagers themselves. Inside, men and women sit together around a large wooden table, discussing the harvest and how to share the surplus. A young woman with a braid down her back stands and speaks clearly. "If one field fails, we all help replant," she says. "If one family hungers, we all share." Heads nod in agreement. There are no titles here, no bowed heads, only voices, steady and equal. You feel the air inside the hall, warm, alive, buzzing with the quiet rhythm of cooperation. This is not the world of kings and peasants anymore. This is something new, something built on survival, on mutual need. As the sun begins to set, Aldrich walks you to the edge of the village. The sky is painted in deep gold and rose, the fields glowing in the fading light. He stops and looks out at the land, his expression soft but resolute. "The plague took half of us," he says, "but it took more from the lords than from us. It took their power, their certainties. The world is wide open now. We build with our hands, not their permission." You watch as he turns back toward his home, the sound of his boots fading into the evening hum. In the distance, a bell tolls for supper, not a command, but a call to gather. The air cools as night settles in, carrying the faint scent of smoke and grain. You realize that something immense has shifted, not just in the soil, but in the human spirit. The people who once bent under the weight of fear now stand straight. Their strength is quiet, grounded, and real. As you make camp beneath the stars, the sound of distant laughter drifts through the dark. You think of Aldrich's words, of the meeting hall, of the fields owned by those who work them. The plague had been death's great equalizer, but its aftermath became life's great redistributor. And in the stillness of the night, you whisper to yourself, the world did not end. It began again in the hands of the humble. The dawn comes bright and restless. You wake to the sound of wheels turning on stone, of horses snorting, of voices calling out prices and greetings. You've reached a town, larger than any you've seen since the plague began. The streets are alive with motion, dust rising in golden plumes beneath the early sunlight. You stand at the gate for a moment, taking it all in. The smell of the place hits you first, a mixture of bread baking, tanned leather, spices, and the faint metallic tang of forge smoke. It's not unpleasant. It smells like work, like survival, like life finding new rhythm in old places. This town, like many others, had nearly emptied during the plague. Whole streets had stood silent, shutters nailed shut, market stalls abandoned to rot. But now, years later, it pulses with energy again. Traders, travelers, craftsmen, people from distant villages, from across valleys and seas, all gathering, all building something new from the ruins of the old world. You wander through the market square, where stalls crowd together beneath colorful awnings. A woman sells bolts of dyed fabric, her hands moving with quick precision as she measures and cuts. A man nearby sharpens knives, sparks dancing from his whetstone. The air hums with voices, haggling, laughing, singing. There's a joy in it, but also something deeper. A shared hunger to connect, to trade, to rebuild. You realize that towns like this have become the new heartbeats of the world. You stop at a stall where a young scribe is selling letters. He writes messages for those who cannot write themselves, notes to family, promises to lovers, records of debts and trades. His ink-stained fingers move fast, his expression calm and focused. "People want to be heard again," he says, glancing up at you. "When the plague came, all we had were prayers. Now, we have words again." Nearby, a group of apprentices gather around a teacher, an older man with white hair and kind eyes. He speaks of numbers, of weights, of fair trade. You listen for a while, realizing that education, once reserved for the church and nobility, is finding its way to the common people. Knowledge, the man says to his students, is the new wealth. It cannot be taxed or stolen. You walk further and find a tavern, its door open, music spilling out. Inside, merchants share stories of their journeys, of new roads being opened, of ships sailing again across distant seas. A man with a scarred face tells of a port city reborn, its markets overflowing with goods from lands long untouched. Everywhere there's motion, movement of goods, of people, of ideas. The plague had broken old borders. Now, curiosity replaces fear. Outside again, you find a group of builders repairing a bridge. Their laughter rings across the river. You pause, watching as one of them turns and says, "We're building faster than the dead can be forgotten." His tone is light, but his words carry truth. The world's rebirth is both an act of defiance and remembrance. By late afternoon, the town glows with the warmth of effort. You sit at the edge of the square, watching a juggler perform for a small crowd of children. Their laughter mixes with the creak of carts and the ringing of a blacksmith's hammer. You realize that the plague had not just changed who survived, it changed how they lived. Towns are no longer places ruled by fear or controlled by guilds and kings. They are melting pots of new beginnings, where skill matters more than birth and trade more than title. As twilight settles, lanterns bloom like stars along the streets. The glow reflects on cobblestones slick with evening mist. A woman begins to sing, a simple song about the sea and the promise of return. The melody drifts through the air, soft and haunting. People stop to listen, some closing their eyes, some smiling faintly. You lean against a wall, feeling the cool stone at your back. The hum of the town surrounds you, voices, laughter, the low thrum of life that refuses to fade. The old world had been built on walls, between rich and poor, between faiths and lands. The new world, born from ashes, is being built on bridges. You watch as a young boy runs past, his arms full of bread, shouting something joyous in the fading light. His voice echoes down the street, bright and free, and as the stars rise above the rooftops, you think the cities of the living have returned, not as monuments to power, but as sanctuaries of hope. The wind carries the scent of rain, and somewhere far away, a bell rings, not for morning, but for closing the market, for rest, for peace. You smile, whispering to the night. The world is learning to move again. The forest hums with life, soft, whispering life. Leaves rustle like distant whispers above you, and somewhere close, a brook murmurs over smooth stones. The air is cool, filled with the earthy scent of moss and the faint sweetness of wild mint crushed beneath your boots. You follow a narrow path through the trees until you see a flicker of movement ahead, the soft glow of a lantern hanging from a low branch. You've come to a clearing. There, beside a small cottage of wood and clay, a woman kneels in her garden, her hands dark with soil. Her hair is streaked with silver, her face calm, eyes sharp. She hums a tune older than memory, a tune carried by generations of healers, mothers, and wise women. She looks up as you approach, not startled, only curious. "You're far from the town," she says, brushing dirt from her hands. "Come in, traveler. The forest keeps its own time. Inside, the cottage is warm and fragrant. Bundles of herbs hang from the ceiling: rosemary, thyme, lavender, sage. Jars of dried leaves line the shelves beside bottles of colored glass filled with tinctures and oils. A small fire crackles in the hearth, its light dancing across the walls. The air feels alive, as if breathing with you. This is the home of a healer, one of the countless women who kept the fragile thread of life from breaking during the dark years of the plague. She pours you a cup of tea, bitter but soothing, and tells her story. Her name is Mirren, once an apprentice to a midwife, later a caretaker for her entire village. When the sickness came, she says, the priests prayed and the doctors fled, but the women stayed. You listen as she recalls how they learned to treat the fevers, not with holy relics, but with herbs that cooled the blood, with tinctures that eased the coughing, with roots that dulled pain. We didn't cure death, she says softly, but we taught life how to endure it. As she speaks, you can almost see it. The small huts lit by candlelight. The smell of smoke and vinegar, the sound of whispered prayers and boiling water. Women moving through the darkness carrying bowls of herbs and rags soaked in rosewater, tending to neighbors even when their own children coughed in the next room. They were not called doctors. They were called witches, wise women, midwives. Names given with both fear and reverence. You look around her cottage, at the books on her shelf, worn, hand-copied, filled with drawings of plants and notes in the margins. We learned by watching, she says. We tested, we remembered, and we passed it on. She shows you a page covered in sketches. Willow bark, known to ease pain. Foxglove, dangerous yet powerful for the heart. Garlic for cleansing wounds. Each plant a story, each story a survival. In towns, physicians trained in the universities had failed during the plague, bound by theories of humors and superstition. But the women in the countryside, the ones who worked with the land, who understood the rhythms of the body, had kept hope alive through touch, through patience, through understanding that nature held answers no man's book yet contained. When you ask if she still heals, Myron smiles. Of course, she says, but the world has changed. The scholars now come to us. They take our herbs, our knowledge, our recipes, and they write them down under their own names. She shrugs, neither bitter nor angry. It does not matter who gets the credit. The healing goes on. Outside, the light fades to dusk. Fireflies rise from the grass, flickering like scattered embers. You sit with her on a wooden bench, watching the glow drift through the forest. The air smells of sage smoke and damp leaves. She speaks again, softly. When the plague came, it took more than lives. It took trust in the body, in the world, in one another. So we rebuilt it, one touch at a time. You close your eyes, letting the words settle. You imagine all the unseen hands that carried life forward, not kings or generals, but quiet women bending over the sick, whispering comfort to the dying, teaching others how to live. The forest grows darker now, the moon rising pale and clear. Myron lights another lantern, its flame steady despite the breeze. She smiles, the corners of her eyes creasing. If the world remembers us, she says, it will be through what still grows. And as you leave her cottage, the air seems full of unseen music, the pulse of the earth itself, reminding you that survival often blooms in silence. You walk away through the whispering woods, feeling both smaller and stronger, your heart steady, your breath slow. Somewhere behind you, a door closes softly, and the scent of lavender lingers in the air. You whisper to yourself, history remembers kings. But life remembers healers. The bells toll slowly, deep and sonorous, echoing through the cold morning air. You walk along a narrow cobbled street toward the great cathedral that rises above the town, its towers scarred by time, its stones darkened by centuries of rain and smoke. Pigeons scatter from the roof as you pass through the great wooden doors, and the heavy scent of incense greets you like a ghost. Inside, the air is cool and dim. Candles flicker along the altar, their flames trembling as if uncertain whether to burn or fade. You stand in the center of the nave, surrounded by echoes, the faint creak of wood, the distant sound of footsteps, and the soft, weary whisper of prayer. You can feel it even before you see it, the weight of faith, cracked but unbroken. In the years before the plague, the church had ruled not only the soul, but the mind. It was the keeper of truth, the voice of God, the power above all powers. But the plague had shaken that foundation like an earthquake, and the tremors were still being felt. When the sickness came, priests had promised salvation to those who repented, but they died too. Monks who had prayed day and night perished beside peasants who could not read a single psalm. Churches had become graveyards, and prayers had gone unanswered. Now, decades later, the survivors carried both faith and doubt within them, two spirits sharing the same fragile heart. You sit on a wooden pew near the back. The priest at the altar is an old man, his robe simple, his voice hoarse but gentle. He does not preach of wrath or punishment. Instead, he speaks of compassion, of rebuilding, of mercy. God, he says, was not absent during the plague. He was in the hands that tended the dying, in the courage of those who stayed when others fled. You watch the congregation, farmers, widows, merchants, even a few former monks in plain clothes. Their faces are solemn, tired, but peaceful. They no longer fear damnation the way their parents did. They seek something quieter, a faith that comforts, not commands. As the sermon ends, a young woman begins to sing. Her voice is clear and haunting, echoing off the stone walls. The melody fills the space like light spilling into shadow. It's not the triumphant sound of the old church. It's a song of mourning and renewal, a song for the living. You walk slowly down the side aisle, running your hand along the cool stone. On one wall, new frescoes have been painted, not of saints in triumph, but of people helping one another. A mother cradling a child, a doctor tending a patient, a group of villagers burying their dead with reverence. You realize something profound, that faith itself has changed shape. It is no longer a ladder reaching to heaven. It is a bridge between souls. Outside, the bells ring again, softer this time. You see nuns distributing bread to the poor, monks teaching children to read beneath the shadow of the cathedral. The church, stripped of its former glory, has become something humbler, a refuge, not a throne. And yet, not all have forgiven. In the taverns, people whisper about false relics, about the wealth that still clings to certain abbeys. In some villages, new forms of worship rise, simpler, freer, born from grief and longing. The seeds of reformation are already in the wind, carried quietly across Europe, waiting to take root. You sit on the cathedral steps as dusk begins to fall. The sunset stains the stone walls gold and red, and the air smells of wax and rain. A child nearby laughs as he chases a pigeon, his laughter echoing against the old walls, a sound brighter than any prayer. You think of Myron, the healer in her forest cottage, and of this priest who preaches mercy instead of fear. Both serve life in their own ways. Both are part of the same fragile, enduring faith, not in power, but in kindness. The bells toll once more. The sound rolls through the town, not as command, but as comfort. You close your eyes and listen. The plague had tested heaven, but in the silence that followed, humanity found God again, not above, but within. The candles flicker out one by one, and the first stars appear above the cathedral spire. You rise, feeling the stillness settle in your bones. The world, you realize, is beginning to forgive itself, and as the night deepens, you whisper to the empty street. The church no longer stands above the people. It stands among them. You wake to the sound of bells, not the heavy toll of morning, but the clear, bright chime of a new beginning. The morning air is alive with motion, carts creaking, students hurrying along narrow streets, voices echoing against walls covered with ivy. The scent of ink and parchment drifts through the open windows of a university courtyard. You have arrived in Florence. The year is somewhere in the late 14th century, though time here feels fluid, bending and unfolding like a manuscript under the sun. The plague has passed, but its shadow lingers, not in sickness now, but in curiosity. The minds that survived want to understand the world that nearly ended. You cross the courtyard, where clusters of students stand in debate, their cloaks billowing in the gentle wind. They speak of Aristotle, of medicine, of stars and numbers. Some argue about the soul, others about the shape of the earth. Their hands move as they talk, alive with restless energy. Inside a stone hall, you find a teacher, an older man with silver hair and eyes that glimmer with patient fire. He stands before a group of students and speaks softly, though every word carries. "The plague taught us the limits of ignorance," he says. "It showed us that prayer alone could not cure, nor faith alone explain. Now we must look again at the world, not through fear, but through reason. He lifts a small glass flask filled with colored liquid. The sunlight catches it, scattering rainbows on the wall. This, he says, is the light of inquiry. Let no one cover it again. You sit near the back, watching as he speaks about medicine, not as divine mystery, but as craft and observation. He describes how knowledge from the Arab world, from old Greek texts long ignored by the church, is returning to Europe through traders and scholars. The old wisdom, he says, did not die in the plague. It waited for us to listen. Outside the hall, you walk through narrow streets lined with new workshops, painters mixing pigments, sculptors shaping marble, printers experimenting with movable type. The air smells of wood shavings, oil, and ambition. The world that had once been obsessed with salvation now turns its gaze toward creation. You pass a workshop where a young man sketches by candlelight. His drawings spill across the table. Human anatomy, birds in flight, machines of gears and pulleys. He glances up briefly, his eyes bright with curiosity. I draw, he says, because I want to understand how God thinks. You smile. The words are bold, but they carry no arrogance. It is a reverence born not of fear, but of wonder. In another square, you watch artists painting frescoes, saints with faces that look human, real, imperfect. Their robes fall with natural folds, their hands hold emotion. Even divinity is being reimagined as something living, something mortal. At night, you find yourself in a small tavern filled with laughter and conversation. A poet recites verses about love and death, not in Latin, but in the language of the people. His words are soft, melodic, carrying the pulse of ordinary life. The listeners nod, some wiping tears, some smiling faintly. They are moved not by fear of judgment, but by the beauty of being alive. As you walk home through the quiet streets, the city glows with candlelight. The stars above seem nearer somehow. The same stars that had watched the world's despair now witness its awakening. You think of the healers, the workers, the towns reborn, and you realize this: the plague had cleared not only lives but certainties. It left space for questions, and in that space, knowledge bloomed. The river Arno murmurs softly as you pass, carrying reflections of moonlight and dreams. A student nearby reads aloud from a scroll, his voice trembling with awe. Man is the measure of all things. You stop to listen. His candle flickers, casting long shadows on the cobblestones. You whisper to yourself, the plague ended an age of faith. But from its ashes rose an age of light. The bells ring again in the distance, not for worship, but for learning. And as the dawn stretches across the city, you feel it deep in your chest. The world is waking not from death, but into discovery. The sea wind is sharp with salt and promise. You stand on a wooden dock, the boards creaking beneath your boots as waves lap against the shore. Ships rise and fall with the tide, sleek vessels with tall masts, their sails fluttering like the wings of restless birds. The morning sun burns through the mist, revealing the harbor, a forest of ropes and rigging. Crates of goods from distant lands, sailors shouting in half a dozen languages. The air smells of tar, citrus, and adventure. It is the 15th century now, and Europe is stirring with new hunger, not for survival, but for expansion. The survivors of the plague, their children and grandchildren, have turned their gaze outward. Once people feared the edges of the world, now they dream of crossing them. You walk along the dock, past a group of cartographers bent over their maps. They work carefully, their ink-stained fingers tracing coastlines that were once just myths. Every voyage, one says, redraws the world. You lean over their shoulders and see the outlines of Europe, of Africa, of imagined islands floating beyond the known seas. Dragons and sea serpents still decorate the corners, but the shapes of truth are beginning to replace the shapes of fear. A captain calls out to his crew, a weathered man with a voice like gravel. The world doesn't end where your courage does. He growls, and the men laugh. You follow him aboard his ship. The deck sways gently beneath your feet. The sails snap in the wind, and gulls cry above. The ocean stretches before you, endless, silver, and alive. As the ship leaves the harbor, the air grows cooler, the sound of waves rhythmic and deep. You feel the spray on your face, the salt on your lips. The sea smells ancient, like time itself. Below deck, you meet the ship's navigator, A quiet man surrounded by compasses, astrolabes, and parchment. He shows you a map, his finger tracing a line westward. The stars, he says, do not lie. They only wait to be read. He tells you how, before the plague, such voyages were rare, too dangerous, too uncertain. But now, with fewer people and greater ambition, the survivors have learned to take risks. When half the world dies, he says softly, the rest learns not to fear the unknown. The days pass in rhythm, the creak of wood, the crash of waves, the songs of sailors. You watch the horizon, endless and inviting. At night, the stars spread above you, so bright and close you feel you could touch them. The navigator points to them one by one, naming each like an old friend: Polaris, Arcturus, Sirius, ancient lights guiding a reborn world. You think of how humanity once looked inward, trapped in the narrow corridors of fear and faith. Now it looks outward, to stars, to oceans, to possibilities. The plague that had silenced nations has, in its strange aftermath, given birth to courage. Weeks later, you reach a foreign shore. The land smells of unfamiliar flowers, its mountains sharp against the sky. The sailors cheer, planting flags and building fires on the beach. You kneel, letting the strange soil run through your fingers. It feels warm, alive. The captain laughs, his eyes bright with triumph. "We've found the world again," he says, "and perhaps ourselves with it." Back on the ship, you look once more at the map, a map no longer bounded by fear, but by curiosity. The lines of exploration spread like veins across the parchment, each one pulsing with the blood of discovery. When you return to Europe, you find ports bustling with trade, spices, gold, new foods, new stories. The streets are filled with rumors of endless lands and endless wealth. But not all eyes gleam with greed. Some shine with wonder, others with awe. The human spirit has stretched across the horizon, and there is no going back. As night falls, you stand once more by the sea. The tide whispers against the shore, carrying the scent of journeys still to come. You think of the healers, the scholars, the poets, and now the explorers, all born from the same silence, all chasing the same fragile truth, that life, once nearly lost, is meant to be lived without boundaries. The wind rises, cool and clean. You look to the stars, steady in the sky, and breathe deeply. Once, we feared the end of the world. Now we seek its edges, and somewhere beyond the horizon, a new dawn waits, not for kings or conquerors, but for dreamers. The smell of ink greets you before you see the machine. It's a thick, earthy scent, oil, wood, and metal, mixed with something sharp and clean, knowledge being born. You step into a small workshop in Mainz, Germany, where the air hums with the rhythm of invention. At the center of the room stands a man, broad-shouldered, his hands dark with ink. He bends over a strange contraption made of gears and levers, his face glowing with both sweat and wonder. This is Johannes Gutenberg. Around him, pieces of lead type lie scattered like tiny fragments of language, waiting to be assembled into meaning. The year is near 1450, though here, time seems to pulse rather than pass. You watch as Gutenberg slides a sheet of rough paper onto the press, adjusts the frame, and turns the handle. The wooden press groans softly, pressing ink to page, not by hand, not by quill, but by machine. When he lifts the platen, the page emerges covered in letters. Perfect, identical, eternal. You step closer, your heart beating with quiet awe. For centuries, knowledge has been a privilege. Hand-copied manuscripts locked in monasteries, words guarded by priests and scholars. Books were precious and learning was slow, like a candle passed from one trembling hand to another. But now, before your eyes, the candle has become a wildfire. Gutenberg looks up, his eyes bright with both exhaustion and triumph. Once words lived only where hands could copy them, he says softly. Now they can live anywhere, everywhere. He holds up the printed page, the ink still wet and gleaming. The word, he whispers, is free. You help him hang the sheets to dry. The workshop glows in the firelight, shadows of letters dancing across the walls. Around you, apprentices work feverishly, arranging type, inking plates, stacking pages. The steady rhythm of the press fills the room like a heartbeat. Days pass. You watch as the first printed Bibles emerge, not painted in gold and guarded by the church, but made for the people. The pages are plain, but their power is limitless. For the first time, the words of God and of men can reach beyond the rich and the learned. In the evenings, you walk through the streets of Mainz. Lanterns flicker in windows where people gather to read aloud. A baker's wife holds a printed prayer in her rough hands, tracing the letters with a trembling finger. A young boy listens, eyes wide, to stories once locked behind Latin and secrecy. You realize you are witnessing something quiet yet revolutionary. Not a war, not a rebellion, but a liberation of thought. Soon, presses spread like wildfire across Europe, to Venice, to Paris, to London. The scent of ink fills the air of every city, a new perfume of progress. Ideas travel faster than plague ever did. You meet printers and scholars along the way, each filled with the same feverish joy. "We are no longer blind," says one in Venice, his fingers blackened with ink. The world can finally read itself. You hold a newly printed pamphlet, small, cheap, filled with poems and thoughts. The words feel alive, their edges sharp, their message clear. It's not just books now. It's opinions, discoveries, dreams. In Florence, a painter reads a treatise on perspective. In Wittenberg, a monk studies scripture and begins to question. In a Paris tavern, men argue over philosophy until dawn. The printed word has broken free, and it cannot be silenced again. At night, you walk by candlelight through a library, once silent, now filled with the rustle of turning pages. The sound is gentle but unstoppable. You close your eyes and think. The plague once emptied the world of voices. Now the press fills it again, louder, freer, eternal. You reach out and touch a page. The ink stains your fingers, dark and permanent. It feels like touching the pulse of humanity itself, a rhythm that will outlast kings, outlast wars, outlast death. The night deepens, and somewhere, a press continues to thrum, slow, steady, infinite. Words have found their wings. The year is 1517, and the air in Wittenberg carries the scent of rain and revolution. The streets are slick with mud, but alive with murmurs, whispers of challenge, of daring words nailed to a door. You stand among the crowd gathered before the castle church. The people speak in low tones, their faces a mixture of fear and curiosity. Before them, nailed to the heavy wooden door, is a list, 95 sentences written not in Latin, but in truth. Martin Luther's theses flutter in the wind like torn leaves of reason. You read the words, their edges sharp as iron. They question indulgences, the buying of forgiveness, the selling of heaven. They speak of faith as something personal, not purchased. And though the paper is small, the sound it makes is thunder. Around you, the world holds its breath. You walk through the crowd and see a printer handing out copies, his hands still wet with ink. "They tried to stop me," he says with a grin, "but you can't silence paper." You take one of the sheets, the letters crisp and dark. The same invention that once brought the Bible to the people now brings rebellion to their hearts. The printing press has become a weapon, not of destruction, but of awakening. In the following weeks, you travel from town to town. Everywhere people read. In taverns, farmers argue with priests. In universities, students debate in candlelight. Faith itself is being rewritten, not by kings, but by minds newly set free. You meet a scholar in Zurich, his eyes bright behind wire-rimmed glasses. "It's not heresy," he says quietly. "It's hunger, hunger for understanding." He shows you a stack of freshly printed pamphlets, their words bold and defiant. "The church taught us to fear knowledge. Now knowledge teaches us to question fear." The words spread like wildfire. Across Europe, reformers rise, in Germany, in Switzerland, in England. Some preach peace, others anger. Some seek renewal, others revolution. But all are moved by the same force, the power of the written word. You visit a monastery where books once chained to walls are now read aloud in the courtyard. The monks no longer whisper their prayers in Latin. They speak them in their own tongue. The language of heaven has come home to the earth. Not all are pleased. In Rome, anger builds like a gathering storm. Edicts are issued, threats made. The presses, once celebrated, are now hunted. But the words will not die. They multiply, hidden in carts, carried in pockets, whispered by torchlight. You find yourself one night in a tavern by the Rhine, where travelers from many lands gather. A young woman reads aloud from a pamphlet, her voice trembling but strong. "We are not born to obey," she says. "We are born to understand." The crowd falls silent, her words hanging in the smoke-filled air like prayer. Outside, the river moves slowly under the moonlight, its surface rippling with silver. You walk along the bank, the distant sound of bells mingling with the whisper of the water. You realize that this quiet rebellion of thought is the true heir to the plague's destruction. The plague had broken bodies. The press now breaks certainties. The silence that once smothered the world has been replaced by questions, by courage, by voices unwilling to fade. You look up at the stars, remembering how explorers once followed them to new worlds. Now humanity is navigating another kind of sea, the sea of ideas, and though it will bring conflict, it will also bring light. For every word that challenges power, another heart learns to think freely. As dawn creeps over the horizon, you return to Wittenberg. The church door stands quiet now, but the words nailed there still echo, not in the air, but in the minds of millions. You stand before it and whisper, "Once we prayed for salvation. Now we print it." The morning bells ring and you smile. The sound, once a reminder of authority, now feels like the heartbeat of awakening. The world has begun to read itself, and it will never close the book again. The air smells of smoke and damp earth. It's the kind of scent that lingers in your clothes, in your hair, in the quiet corners of your memory. You stand on a hillside in Central Europe, looking down upon a valley wrapped in mist. Below, soldiers move like shadows, banners fluttering, armor glinting faintly under a gray dawn. The world, once healing from pestilence, now burns again, this time from within. You can hear the echo of drums, slow, relentless. They roll across the hills, blending with the low murmur of the wind. This is not the sound of progress. It's the sound of belief clashing against belief. The Reformation, once a whisper of conscience, has become a roar of division. You descend toward the valley, the mud thick beneath your boots. The soldiers' faces are grim, eyes hollow. They wear crosses and symbols of faith, yet their hands tremble, not from devotion, but from fear. Across the field, their enemies bear the same cross, but painted in different colors. Both sides pray to the same God. Both believe they are right. You pass through the campfires. The sharp scent of burning wood and sweat fills the air. A young soldier sharpens his blade, murmuring a psalm under his breath. "God protect the true faith," he whispers. You ask him which faith that is. He looks up, confused. "Ours," he says, as if no other could exist. As dawn breaks, the battle begins. The ground shakes beneath the cannon's roar. Smoke rises, thick and choking, swallowing the cries of men. You can see banners fall, trampled underfoot. Faith has become fire, and fire consumes everything it touches. In the distance, church bells ring, not in prayer, but in alarm. Villages burn, libraries are ransacked, and cathedrals that once offered sanctuary now echo with the cries of the dying. The wars of religion have begun, the 30 Years' War, the French Wars of Religion, countless smaller uprisings across the continent, all fueled by conviction, all painted with righteousness. You walk through the ruins of a once proud city, Prague, or perhaps Magdeburg. It's hard to tell now. The streets are silent except for the crackle of fire. A printing shop lies in ashes, the scent of burned paper thick in the air. You kneel among the debris and find a single page half charred, still legible. The words read, "Faith without compassion is empty." You fold the fragment carefully and carry it with you. Days turn into weeks, and you journey across broken lands. Everywhere you go, the world feels like a mirror cracked into pieces, each shard reflecting its own truth. In some towns, Catholic processions wind through streets lined with icons and incense. In others, Protestant psalms rise from simple wooden churches. Both sing to heaven. Both weep, yet amid the suffering. Something remarkable begins to take root. Not peace, not yet, but the faint stirring of understanding. You meet a Jesuit scholar who shelters Protestant children during a siege. Faith, he tells you quietly, is meant to lift men up, not set them against one another. Later, in a ruined village, a Lutheran preacher gives bread to starving Catholic refugees. He says nothing of doctrine, only of mercy. These small acts feel like candles burning in the wind, fragile, yet enough to hold back the darkness for a while. When the war finally ends, the land is exhausted. Fields lie fallow, cities hollowed out, families scattered. The Peace of Westphalia is signed in 1648, and Europe breathes, broken but alive. You stand in Minster's town hall as the treaty is signed. The room smells of ink wax and old wood. The diplomats speak in careful Latin, their voices weary. They have seen too much, lost too much. As the final seal is pressed into the parchment, the sound is small, just a soft click. But it feels like thunder. Outside, church bells ring again. This time they ring for peace. You walk through the streets that evening. The air is still smoky, but the rain has begun to fall, washing the ashes from the stones. A group of children splash in puddles, laughing, the first laughter you've heard in years. You close your eyes, letting the rain touch your face. The war of faith has ended, but its lesson remains. Belief can unite, but it can also destroy. The choice lies always in the hands of those who hold it. You whisper into the quiet air, may conviction never again drown out compassion. And somewhere, beneath the soft rumble of thunder, it feels as if the world agrees. The century turns, and the world begins to breathe differently. The fires of war fade, replaced by the soft glow of candles in study rooms, in observatories, in quiet corners where thinkers bend over parchment and ask new questions. You find yourself in Florence, the city reborn. The streets are alive with artisans, mathematicians, dreamers. It smells of rain and olive oil, of parchment and stone. The plague's shadow is long gone now, yet its echo remains, in the hunger to understand what once seemed unknowable. One evening, you climb the narrow steps of a tower. At the top, beneath a canopy of stars, a man waits, Galileo Galilei. His telescope stands before him, pointed toward the heavens. The night is cold, and the stars seem almost too sharp, as if freshly cut from silver. "Look," he says, motioning you forward. You peer through the lens and gasp. The moon, once thought perfect, is scarred and cratered. Jupiter, bright and proud, has moons of its own. The heavens, it turns out, are not flawless. They are alive, moving, changing. Galileo smiles faintly. "The church says heaven is unchanging," he murmurs. "But God's universe seems to love motion." His words are quiet, yet you feel their weight. You sense the danger. Knowledge is still a kind of rebellion. But Galileo's eyes are calm, filled with the same light that burns in his telescope. You travel on, to England, to France, to the Netherlands, lands where science hums softly beneath the surface. You visit Isaac Newton in his study in Cambridge, surrounded by prisms and apples. The air smells faintly of candle wax and chalk dust. He speaks softly, his voice trembling with both humility and awe. "The universe," he says, "is written in the language of mathematics." You watch as he splits a beam of sunlight, scattering rainbows across the room. For the first time, you understand. Light itself is truth waiting to be broken open. Outside, Europe transforms. The same presses that once printed prayers now print treatises on astronomy, medicine, philosophy. Scholars write not to defend faith, but to expand understanding. The air is thick with new words: gravity, anatomy, reason, liberty. You walk through a library in Paris, filled with the scent of vellum and dust. The shelves groan beneath the weight of human curiosity. Men and women sit quietly, reading, thinking. No swords here, no banners, only minds at work. The Enlightenment has begun. You attend a salon one evening, where thinkers gather beneath chandeliers. The air buzzes with discussion. Descartes speaks of doubt, Voltaire of freedom, Rousseau of society. Candles flicker as arguments rise and fall. But there is laughter too, laughter not of mockery, but discovery. You realize something profound. Humanity, once humbled by the plague, is learning to rebuild itself not with fear, but with thought. Still, not everyone welcomes the light. In dark corners, suspicion lingers. Some say knowledge tempts pride. Others say it defies God. But the tide is too strong now. The printing presses keep rolling. The telescopes keep turning. The books keep opening. You wander outside after midnight. The city quiet. The river reflects the moonlight like liquid glass. You breathe deeply, the scent of ink and night air mingling. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a clock strike 12. You think of all that has passed, the death, the wars, the endless cycles of despair and renewal. And yet here you are, standing beneath the stars, surrounded by the soft hum of human thought. You smile softly, whispering to the night, "The plague took our bodies, but it gave us our minds." A soft breeze moves through the city. stirring the leaves, carrying the scent of a new world being born, not through conquest or prayer, but through curiosity. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the river, steady, unhurried, eternal. The age of reason has begun, and the world at last is learning to see. The air tastes of salt and adventure. You stand at the edge of a harbor, somewhere in Lisbon perhaps, or Venice, or Amsterdam, as the morning sun spills across a sea the color of polished bronze. The masts of ships rise like forests, creaking gently in the wind. Seagulls circle overhead, their cries blending with the shouts of sailors, the splash of waves, and the faint clatter of crates being loaded onto decks. The century has turned again, and the world once broken by plague and war now reaches outward, across oceans, across continents. You smell spices in the air, cinnamon, pepper, cloves, scents once rare, now carried across the waves like whispers from distant lands. You walk down the pier, past sailors tying ropes and merchants counting coins. The world's heart now beats in ports and harbors, in the rhythmic crash of surf against hull, in the roll of barrels filled with silks, tea and gold. You pause beside a ship preparing to depart. Its sails hang like great white wings. The captain, a weathered man with eyes like polished stone, nods to you. "We sail east," he says, "to where the sun rises." You step aboard. The deck smells of tar and pine. The ropes creak as the crew works, and soon the harbor begins to shrink behind you, its towers and bells fading into mist. Ahead lies open water, a vast mirror stretching to the horizon. Days pass. The sea becomes your companion, endless, unpredictable, alive. Some mornings, it is calm as glass, reflecting the sky's soft blush. Other days, it rises in fury, waves crashing like thunder against the hull. The wind howls through the rigging, and you taste the salt on your lips. You stand beside the helmsman one night, beneath a canopy of stars. He points upward, tracing constellations with a calloused finger. "These lights," he says softly, "are the same ones our fathers followed." You realize that though the world has changed, the sky remains, the silent guide of dreamers and explorers. Weeks later, land appears. Not just land, but color. The forests glow deep green, the air heavy with scents of flowers and rain. You hear birds unlike any you've known, their cries sharp and bright. The ship anchors offshore and small boats row toward the beach. This is Asia, or the edge of it. You feel it in the humidity, in the vibrant sounds, in the market smells that drift even from here. In a bustling port, you walk among traders from every corner of the world. Silk from China glimmers under the sunlight like liquid moonlight. Bags of pepper and nutmeg spill open, their aroma dizzying. There are voices in a dozen languages, laughter, bargaining, shouting, and all of it flows like a river of human connection. Trade has become the new pulse of civilization. You meet a scholar from Persia who shows you maps painted in gold, their edges curling with strange sea creatures. "The world grows smaller," he says, "but our understanding grows vast. In India, you smell cardamom and sandalwood. In the Spice Islands, you walk beneath palm trees that sway like soft whispers. In the ports of Africa, drums echo through the humid air, mingling with the chants of merchants and sailors. Everywhere you go, you see faces exchanging more than goods. They exchange ideas, beliefs, stories. A Chinese navigator studies a Dutch compass. An English scholar reads an Arabic text on medicine. A Portuguese sailor hums a tune he learned from a man in Calicut. The oceans have become veins, carrying the lifeblood of the world. Culture, art, faith, greed, hope. But not all is light. You see ships leaving Europe empty, only to return heavy with cargo not of silk or spice, but of people, chained, silent, stolen. The transatlantic slave trade has begun, and its shadow stretches across the water like an ink stain. In the Caribbean, sugar fields gleam beneath the sun, but the sweetness is born from pain. You walk among the plantations, and the air is thick with the sound of labor, of whip and weeping. The same ocean that connects the world now also divides it, between those who trade freely and those who are traded. You feel the weight of contradiction, humanity reaching for discovery and beauty, yet still bound by cruelty. One evening, you sit on the deck of a ship crossing the Atlantic, watching the sunset bleed into the waves. The sky burns orange and gold, and the wind smells faintly of salt and sorrow. You whisper to the sea, "We have learned to travel far, but not yet to be kind. The stars come out bright and distant. You close your eyes, listening to the waves. The ship creaks, the ocean breathes, and somewhere in the dark, you feel the heartbeat of a world in motion, flawed, fragile, but still reaching. You think of how the plague once isolated villages, how fear once sealed borders. Now humanity sails beyond its own horizon, bound by both greed and wonder, and the world, for better or worse, has become one ocean of stories. You awaken to the sound of trumpets and horses' hooves echoing on cobblestones. The scent of gunpowder and perfume fills the air. You're standing in a city transformed, London, perhaps, or Paris, or Madrid. Its skyline crowned with domes and spires, its streets alive with color and noise. The age of empire has dawned. You walk through a grand square where banners flutter in the morning light. Merchants display silks from India, porcelain from China, tobacco from the New World. Crowds move like a tide, nobles in powdered wigs, soldiers in gleaming armor, beggars in rags. The empire's riches are visible everywhere, and yet, so too are its costs. The smell of coal drifts from nearby factories, a dark reminder that progress has a price. You wander into a coffee house, the new kind of meeting place, where philosophers and merchants sit side by side. The room buzzes with conversation. Maps cover the walls, filled with red lines and shaded territories. A man taps one with his cane. "Here," he says, "the British rule the seas. Here, the French build glory. Here, the Dutch trade the world." You sip bitter coffee, its warmth grounding you. Around you, men debate about commerce, faith, and empire. Some speak of civilization, others conquest. As the years pass in your mind, you travel through empires, from the polished courts of Versailles to the humid colonies of the Caribbean, from the Mughal palaces of India to the dusty forts of Africa. You see beauty and brutality intertwined, always. In India, the air hums with the scent of jasmine and gunpowder. British officials dine in marble halls while famine gnaws at the countryside. You hear the songs of laborers in the fields, their voices soft, enduring, defiant. In Africa, drums echo under the red sun. Traders build forts along the coast, their cannons pointed both outward and inward. The land is rich, the people proud, yet the chains of empire tighten, invisible but strong. In the Americas, cities rise on stolen soil. Plantations sprawl across the horizon, their beauty masking human pain. And yet, among the enslaved and oppressed, songs of freedom bloom, songs that will one day shake the world. You see both splendor and suffering, the golden rooms of kings glittering above the dark alleys of the poor. The plague once leveled all men in death. Empire now divides them again in life. One night you stand before the Thames in London. The air smells of smoke and wet stone. Ships glide past, heavy with goods from every corner of the earth. You can almost hear the whisper of faraway waves, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Atlantic, all meeting here in this city of fog and ambition. Beside you, a young writer sketches the scene. "The world has grown vast," he says quietly, "and yet we've caged it in gold." You walk on, through narrow streets and candle-lit taverns, through markets that never sleep. Everywhere you see progress, but also exhaustion. Humanity has learned to conquer the seas, to build machines, to shape the earth itself. But still, it does not know how to rest. In a quiet corner of a library, you find a map, not of land or sea, but of time. On it, you trace your journey: plague, recovery, faith, war, reason, discovery, empire. It all flows together like a river, winding endlessly forward. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance. Rain begins to fall, soft and cleansing. You step into it, tilting your face upward. The city's noise fades beneath the gentle rhythm of water. You think of the sailors who braved unknown seas, of scholars who reached for the stars, of workers who built empires brick by brick. You think of how far humanity has come, and how far it still must go. The empire's lights flicker in the rain, golden and ghostly. You close your eyes, and in the hum of the storm, you can almost hear the world whisper, "Everything we build begins with curiosity and ends with consequence." As the rain grows stronger, washing the soot from the streets, you walk into the mist. Somewhere a bell tolls. The wind smells of wet stone and distant oceans. The age of empire is not yet over, but you sense its weight, its trembling. Beneath the grandeur, cracks begin to form, and somewhere beyond the horizon, a new dawn stirs. The smell of smoke is different this time. Not from plague pyres nor cannon fire, but from torches carried by crowds who no longer whisper, they shout. The cobblestones of Paris are slick with rain and defiance. You stand among them, shoulder to shoulder with bakers. Students, women in torn dresses, men with rough hands and burning eyes. It is late in the 18th century, and the air hums with electricity, invisible but alive. The old world trembles on its foundations. The people have begun to speak. You hear it first as a murmur rising through alleyways and marketplaces. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. The words are soft at first, then fierce like sparks catching wind. The crowd moves toward the Bastille, its gray towers looming above like the bones of a dying era. The sound grows, 1,000 feet, 1,000 hearts. The smell of gunpowder mixes with the scent of bread and sweat and wet iron. The gates crack open, and the roar that follows feels like thunder breaking after centuries of silence. You step back, watching as the fortress falls, not just in stone, but in symbol. The people have torn down more than walls. They have shattered fear itself. In the days that follow, you wander the streets of a city reborn and uncertain. Heads roll beneath the guillotine, yes, the price of passion unbound. But beneath the chaos, something undeniable stirs, a belief that power belongs not only to kings, but to all who draw breath. You visit a printing shop, small and cluttered, where pamphlets are piled like kindling. The air smells of ink and revolution. A young woman reads aloud, her voice trembling but strong. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. The men nod. The words move through them like wine. You realize you have heard this before. Not these exact syllables, but their echo. From monks who questioned Rome, from sailors who crossed oceans, from thinkers who gazed at the stars. Humanity's awakening has been long in the making. The streets of Paris glow with candlelight. Children run barefoot through puddles reflecting flames. A woman sings softly from her balcony, her voice drifting over the rooftops, a lullaby for a new age. But revolution is not confined to France. Across the Atlantic, a new nation has already risen. 13 colonies that once bowed to empire now calling themselves United States. You stand in Philadelphia as men sign their names to parchment, their quills scratching like quiet thunder. All men are created equal, they write, their faces solemn, their hands shaking. The ink dries slowly, heavy with hope and contradiction. You feel the world tilt again, old powers fading, new ones forming. The wind carries whispers of freedom to every corner of the earth. To Haiti, where enslaved men fight for their dignity. To South America, where Bolivar dreams of unity. To the factories of England, where workers begin to see their strength. It is as if the plague's shadow, centuries old, has finally burned away, leaving a people who no longer fear death as much as silence. You travel through villages and cities alike, feeling it everywhere, in the press of bodies, in the speeches that echo through the night, in the trembling of old palaces. The world is no longer ruled by kings and priests, but by the idea that every soul counts. And yet, even as freedom spreads, you see the cracks. Wars born from ideology, greed cloaked in liberty, empires reborn in new names. But still you sense something irreversible has happened. The human heart has remembered its voice. As dusk falls one evening, you walk through the streets of Paris again. The rain has stopped. The air smells of wet stone and new beginnings. Bells ring from every tower, not in mourning or alarm, but in celebration. You pause beneath a street lamp and whisper, once we feared death. Now we fear silence. The night answers with a distant cheer, and the faint flutter of flags bright against the wind. The world, now centuries older, breathes softly again. The year is distant, perhaps 1900, perhaps beyond, and you find yourself standing in a quiet park as the first light of dawn spills across the earth. The grass is cool beneath your feet, the air thick with dew and the scent of smoke and rain. Cities hum in the distance, not the roar of cannons or crowds, but the low mechanical rhythm of progress. Steam engines sigh, factories thrum, newspapers flutter from morning presses. Humanity, restless and curious, has stepped into yet another age. You walk slowly, hands clasped behind your back. The world feels familiar and foreign all at once. There are no kings above all men now, no single church to dictate belief. Only millions of minds, working, building, doubting, dreaming. You. Hear laughter from a street nearby. Children chasing a wooden hoop, their joy light as wind. They do not remember plague, nor feudal lords, nor hunger that emptied whole villages. They inherit a world scarred but alive. You sit on a park bench and watch the sunrise. The light touches everything. Stone, iron, skin, sky, with the same golden gentleness. You think of all the ages you have passed through, the silence of the plague, the whispers of recovery, the hymns of faith, the fires of war, the hum of invention, the sails and smoke of empire, the cries of revolution. Each chapter of humanity's story, each step from darkness into dawn. A soft wind stirs the leaves beside you. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings the hour. You realize that history never ends. It only turns the page. You walk again, through streets lined with lamps that glow even in daylight, powered by unseen energy. In a shop window, you see a printing press replaced by a typewriter, and beside it, a telegraph tapping faintly, carrying words across continents in seconds. What once took lifetimes now happens in moments. You smile, remembering the first press you saw centuries ago, Gutenberg's hands black with ink, his face lit with hope. He could never have imagined this. Voices speaking to one another from across oceans, knowledge shared faster than thought itself. And yet, as you watch the city wake, you feel a familiar truth. Progress always walks hand in hand with peril. The same machines that carry letters can also carry bombs. The same minds that dream of flight can build fire. Humanity's light, bright as it is, still casts shadows. But you also know this. We are learning. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. You leave the city and walk toward the hills. The air grows cleaner, the sound of wind replaces the clatter of streets. You reach a quiet meadow where wildflowers bend beneath the breeze. The sun has risen fully now, and the world feels both ancient and newborn. You lie back in the grass, eyes closed, listening to the hum of bees, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of children. The earth itself seems to breathe beneath you. You think of all those who came before, peasants and poets, sailors and scientists, rebels and dreamers. Every one of them, in some way, carried the world forward. Every one of them whispered the same quiet promise, that life continues and that learning never ends. You smile. The Black Death had once emptied the world of sound. No laughter, no footsteps, only wind through graves. But now, centuries later, the earth hums again with the living, louder, wiser, gentler. As the day warms, you rise and look back toward the distant city. Smoke rises from its chimneys like prayers, mingling with clouds. The world, for all its scars, still turns. You breathe deeply and whisper to the morning air, "We fell to darkness, but we learned to see. We lost everything, but we found ourselves." A bird takes flight above you, wings flashing in the light. Its cry fades into the open sky, free, fearless, infinite. And as you watch it rise higher and higher, you know this. History is not a story of endings, but of continuations. Every dawn, every voice, every small act of kindness, they are all new beginnings. The wind moves softly across the meadow, carrying your whisper with it. The world sleeps, wakes, and dreams again, just as it always has. The light spreads, and the story ends not in silence, but in peace. End of series. What happened after the Black Death ended? Boring history for sleep.